Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. And if you enjoy the fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic.
What if Hokage Naruto lost everything, then returned to the past with Shikamaru and Lee to rewrite history? Chapter 1. Crimson flames licked away at Konoha, leaving ashes in their wake. The 22-year-old Rokudime Hokage, and commander-in-chief of the Joint Alliance, Namikaze Naruto stared at his beloved village in agony. It was gone, everyone was gone. There was nothing left. His Konoha had been destroyed, all of the 5 nations lay in ruins. To his right stood Nara Shikamaru, Jonin, captain of tactical operations, resident genius of the Leaf, and possibly the laziest ninja alive. Calculating eyes dispassionately watched the burning carnage. He lit a cigarette and took a long drag. Not even his customary troublesome came out of Shikamaru's mouth. This was how terrible the situation was. To the Rokudime's left, stood Rock Lee, Jonin, and captain of the ground forces, in all of his spandex-clad glory. His onyx eyes shifted from one emotion to the next, before he slowly sank to his knees, tears streaming down his face that had matured over the years, giving him a rugged look. They were the last 3 left. The war, it had destroyed everything. The civilians were gone. There was no reason to have a Hokage, hell there was no reason to have shinobi anymore. And what could they do against such an army anyway? The war which had started 6 years prior had never ended. Sasuke had destroyed everything and everyone that stood in his way, including Sakura. Madara had tried to unleash the Jubi with Obito, and partially succeeded. Naruto shuddered just thinking about what Madara and Obito had done, who they had killed, and what it had taken to restrain them. It had only been some time back that the village had been weary, but intact. And yesterday they had lost 80% of the remaining force to control the rampaging beast. So many had died within seconds, too many more had followed. It had taken B's death, and the outpouring of chakra from the Hachibi to cause a ceasefire. Madara had believed that he would be able to control the Hachibi's chakra, but he had been foolish. Gyuki's will to protect was far greater than Madara's, which was to destroy. Madara, and Obito to an extent, had been severely wounded, and those wounds destroyed the sustenance of the almost Jubi. No one had seen hide or hair of Madara or Obito, not that many were alive to see it. Most likely, they were resting, planning, getting ready to strike again. But strike at what? Damn the Uchiha clan. Hope was gone. There was no way out. They would die, and the masked fiend would win, even if he himself was gone. Naruto had realized early on in the war that simply barging into war headfirst without an actual plan was not a good idea. It had taken time, but Naruto had grown out of his childish habits. With Kurama under his control, Naruto was a force to be reckoned with. Yet everything that they had done was in vain. Too many people had been sacrificed, and for what? A lost battle. Jiraiya, Itachi, Pain, Konan, Iruka, Kakashi, Sakura, Asuma, Anko, Shizune, Tamari, Killer Bee, Mei, Darui, Samui, Komui, Karen, Jugo, Sugestu, Konohamaru, Gaara, Konkuro, Baki, Tsunade, Ino, Tenten, Neji, Gai, Kurenai, Shino, Kiba, Hinata, Choji, everyone. No one had survived. Everyone they had loved was gone. Anko and Yamato were Mia, only to be found Kia after Kabuto was taken care of. What had been done to them was brutal. It made Naruto want to vomit. In the midst of Naruto's turbulent mind, one being that transcended heaven and hell raised its regal head. He watched the destruction of the village he himself had once been forced to destroy by the very same man. He sensed his jailer's rage and anguish, and for the first time, the Kyuubi felt compassion. compassion for Naruto, the people he had lost, and the future. For more than half of Naruto's life, he had been the pariah of the Leaf Village, all because of him. But then his charge had gained the respect of everyone in the village and become a hero all on his own. And now the hero was on the brink of collapsing. Kyuubi knew that Naruto was going to die either way, and if Naruto died, then so did he. His jailer, possibly the bravest man of his age, would not die such an inglorious death, nor would he die this young. Dying was not something that was in his interest, nor the world's interest. It was not his time, not Naruto's time. There was only one option left that would ensure the survival of not only Naruto and himself, but all the people who had fallen, all the people that Naruto had mourned for. This was what he could give back to the man who had given him his name again. Hit! Kurama's deep rumble startled Naruto. What do you want, Fox? The man's mind was too fatigued for his companion's inevitable ranting. Don't give me that tone. Listen carefully, my boy. To you, the future is bleak, a dark void in which you do not want to step foot into. But for me, I can tell that this path that the heavens have laid out for you, this path is not the only path there is to take. You, child, will take the road less traveled by, the fox said cryptically. This made Naruto curious. He stood slightly straighter. All right, my friend, what is it that you're talking about? The giant fox hesitated ever so slightly before answering. However, seeing the spark in his jailer's eyes brought out his resolve. There's a jutsu, not known to humans, but known to all Biju. It can only be performed once, and at great risk to the being doing it. But for you, and for me, it's our last chance to set things right. No one has ever been so stupid or desperate to try it, but like I said, it's our last chance. Naruto was almost scared to ask. What is it? What could it possibly be? He heard the fox inhale and exhale deeply. Time travel. I'll be doing it, but you'll be my conduit. It'll take you back to where this mess began in the first place. Kurama lazily blinked as Naruto's expression changed from sullen resignation to curiosity, to finally a triumphant visage of desire. For the first time in what seemed like years, just a sliver of hope surged through Naruto's veins. He had a chance to change everything, a chance to stop the people he loved from dying. But wait, the fox was proposing this, there had to be some catch. Why are you doing this? Why do you want to help me? What's in it for you? Kurama sighed at Naruto's questions. Of course the kid had the right to be wary of him. He had tried to trick the kid into releasing the seal on a couple occasions. Even if they had made their peace, the kid would not completely trust him, and he shouldn't. Foxes were sly after all. Naruto had aged over time, dropping the naivety that Kurama had said that he had all those years ago. The kid now knew that for every action, there was an equal and opposite reaction. Konoha's destruction was a fine example of such a law. Listen, kid, you know that you're going to die, or rather, you want to die. But there is still something to live for. The fact is, if you die, then I die, and I don't want that. If you die, then my spirit will reform again, and it will be filled with hatred once more. Now before you say that I'm being selfish or something, hear me out. It's not our time. Fate dictates as such. You should have lived to a ripe old age, older than most because of me. You should have had a beautiful wife and many little kits running around the place. This was not your future, not ours. And then when you died, I would have gone on to the next realm, with my brothers and sisters, to the only human that I would call father, your ancestor Naruto, the Rakudo Sennin. Naruto frowned. He had never heard such a soft and caring tone from the fox, ever. How do you know this? Kurama was silent for some moments before he spoke again, his tone oddly soft for an angry sentient being. Naruto, I am millions of years old, older than your Rakudo Sennin. There are some things that cannot be explained, and this is one of them. I have this sense. Well, actually all the Biju have it, but because I am the Nine Tails, and the strongest of the nine, my sense is much stronger than the others. This sense allows me to know things that no one should know, such as the future. Of course, I can't literally see into the future, but I can predict it to an extent. It's one of my gifts as a Biju. Naruto wanted to scream at the Kitsune for not telling him this sooner, but he did not have the energy to do so. He didn't know how potent this sense was, and if he could have used it to prevent the future. But judging from what Kurama had said before, it seemed as though the fox thought that all wrongs would have righted and Naruto would live the life he was supposed to. Obviously, the future had changed. Naruto exhaled deeply. "What is it that you want me to do?" he asked resignedly. Kurama grinned slightly, revealing pointed canines. "The seal for the Hiraishin is a time-space seal. The people who think that it is simply a seal for moving at high speeds are fools. Your father was a damn genius, and so is that seal. You are jumping through time for a split second while using it. The design is from an old Uzumaki Fuinjutsu technique that your mother gave Namikaze way back when. Your father modified it to fit his needs with your mother's help." Naruto nodded. He knew this information already. In fact, he had perfected his father's famed jutsu and become a Fuinjutsu master just like his father and godfather. But this seal can be modified even further, and if it is modified correctly, it becomes something completely different. It becomes, when activated, a portal. This portal, depending on how much chakra you use, has the ability to go back in time. It's a black hole, if you will. If I use all of my chakra, and you use maybe half of yours, that should be plenty to go back 10 years or so, to the time when you were a genin. The fox paused and reached a giant claw out to Naruto. The cage was unnecessary now. He drew himself to his full height and looked his jailer in the eye. "So tell me, Naruto, are you willing to take this risk?" Saying no wasn't even an option. If he could do it again, then he would. Icy blue eyes glinted with sheer resolve. "I'll do it." Kurama laughed at the man, his crimson eyes glinting with masked pride. Naruto certainly had come a long way. "Very well then. This is the seal." The fox projected the image of a seal that looked very much like the Hiraishin, but with 2 deviations. Naruto had to admit that this seal was ingenious, yet very, very dangerous. There was a 7-pronged seal that rested over a 13-pronged one. 7 and 13 were the 2 most difficult numbers to work with in the sealing business. So much could go wrong, and so much could go right. But desperate times called for desperate measures. He had to do this. The trick to these types of seals was the use of blood. Though using Ketsuki Fuinjutsu, or blood sealing, was dangerous, it was infinitely more accurate and precise than simple ink. Using a kunai, Naruto let himself bleed into a vial that appeared from nowhere, waiting until it was full to start. In his mindscape, the sewer where the Kyuubi resided, Naruto began to work, picturing the Hiraishin seal in front of him. He meticulously worked, tweaking the seal all under the watchful eye of the Kyuubi. On the hologram-like image of the seal, he added his blood, using patterns of 7s and 13s to stabilize and centralize the seal to his own liking. Using his blood didn't mean that if he failed in his goal, then his body would pay the price. For example, assuming that he traveled back in time, and he couldn't stop the wrong that would happen, the Shinigami wouldn't take his soul. However, if something went wrong in the actual creation of the seal, then he would die. There was no question about it. After what felt like hours, he stopped. Sweat covered his handsome face. "It's done," he told Kurama. Said Fox took a look at the seal shimmering above the murky waters. "Nice job, Kit. I guess you truly are your father's son." "I thought you hated my father." Naruto deadpanned. Kurama chuckled. "I did, Kit, and I still do, but I'm respecting his sealing abilities, not the man he was, or what he did to me, to us." Naruto shook his head. So now what? Now, it begins. Brace yourself, kid. This is going to hurt. Kurama closed his eyes and concentrated all of his will into Naruto. Namikaze Naruto. Kurama thought as all consciousness left his body, you will achieve even greater things in your new life than you did in this one. Ganbat, Gaki, you're going to need it. The giant fox closed his eyes. If anyone looked closely, one could see the barest hint of a smile on the being's face. He too had hope. With that done, red volatile chakra that Naruto despised began to seep through the bars that kept Kurama sealed away and into the seal. The Rakudo seal glowed red. Naruto was flung into the waters by the immense power that was building in his mind. It was too much. He was forcefully ejected from his mind. The last thing he saw in there was the Kyuubi expelling all of his chakra into Naruto's astral form. He dropped to his knees, much to the surprise of his two companions. They hurried to his side, trying to shake him out of the seemingly agonized state he was in. Had Naruto been injured somehow, and they didn't know about it? Naruto, Ruto, what's wrong? Shikamaru tried to shake him, but his body was rigid. Instead his head snapped up and the two recoiled. Instead of his regular blue, red irises looked back at them. Kyuubi, Naruto-kun. Lee's panicked voice seemingly echoed through his head. Even through his pain-racked condition, Naruto could see the two of them clearly. Emotion rushed through him. He couldn't be the only one to go back. He couldn't leave these two in this hell. What they started together would end together. Let them hate him, curse him, whatever. He needed them with him. His mind was set, and no one would deter him. I'm sorry, but I have to do this. His voice was harsh and gruff, a low growl. As quick as lightning, he grasped both of their elbows, taking chakra from them in the process. Before anyone could comprehend what was going on, they vanished in a giant vortex of red and blue light, disappearing from this plane of existence and into the next. Darkness, the north wind, blowing. Insects, chirping, annoyed probably. The sweet smell of dewy grass. Faint rumblings from the forest around, wild animals looking for food. And then, eyes opened, widened, and gasped. For what those eyes saw was Konoha. The first thing that Naruto felt as he woke was pain. The first thing Shikamaru felt as woke was lethargy. The first thing Lee felt as he woke was bursts of unending energy. Shikamaru groaned. He tried to sit up, but promptly fell on his back once again. My sentiments exactly. Naruto winced. He actually did manage to come to a sitting position, rubbing his eyes, trying to figure out if Kurama's plan had worked, or if he had screwed up royally and dragged his best friends into a new hell for nothing. Naruto. Shikamaru's voice was low as he observed their surroundings. Then his eyes traveled to his friends and a low groan settled in his throat. Kami, or in this case, the Kyuubi, had a really odd way of setting things right. For this could only be the Kyuubi's doing. This had to be a joke. Naruto-kun. Lee's voice rattled both Naruto and Shikamaru, who shot the spandex-clad man dirty looks before their eyes widened as they took in Lee's appearance. Lee had the decency to look abashed. Yet his expression changed to one of bafflement as soon as he saw where they had landed. Shika. Lee, are we where I think we are? Naruto asked slowly, painfully. The blonde staggered to his feet, wobbling slightly, but holding his own. Beside him, he felt his two companions do the same. The Valley of the End. Shikamaru exhaled slowly, wishing that he had a cigarette. Wait. Hadn't this place been destroyed? He stared at the figures of Senju Hashirama and Uchiha Madara with undisguised suspicion before looking back at Naruto with the same expression. How ironically fitting. Lee had an uncharacteristically morose expression. Guys, I hate to break this to you, but we look like we're 12. Naruto deadpanned, looking at the adolescent versions of his best friends. He winced as he took in the horrendous orange jumpsuit that he was so famous for. I know. What the hell did you do? Shikamaru asked. There was no hostility in his voice, just resigned acceptance. I didn't do anything besides modify a seal. Naruto pointed to his gut. Kurama did it. He saved the future by saving us. A moment of silence passed, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the hooting of owls off in the distant night. It was quite a peaceful atmosphere for such a violent present. 10 years. Naruto continued, trying to regulate his chakra with breathing. He could feel his nearly inexhaustible energy trying to cope with his teenage body. We're 10 years in the past. Shika and I are 12, and Lee, you're 13. Shikamaru circled around his friend, stumbling slightly. So let me get this straight. The fox, Kurama, sent us and only us back in the past so that we could play Kami and save the world from imploding. His onyx eyes held Naruto's steady gaze, the gaze of his Hokage, his master. Yes, Naruto replied. Lee watched with trepidation as his best friends engaged in a staring contest, neither blinking, neither moving. All he could do was hope that nobody acted rashly. So we can save everybody? Shikamaru finally asked. Only those who are meant to be saved. Temari included. Naruto added the last part quietly, remembering the woman who was the closest thing he had to a sister. Tears prickled Shikamaru's eyes as he thought of his Temari, his wife, the only woman troublesome enough for him, who had died in his arms along with his unborn child. Could this really be true? Could he have another chance? What's the catch? Naruto snorted. Of course, as a Nara, it was in Shikamaru's blood to look at all the angles. He didn't know whether to be delighted or concerned when Shikamaru asked the same question that he had asked the fox. I have no idea, he replied honestly. All I know is that we're back, 10 years in the past. Kurama informed me before he performed that we're most likely Genin, so this places us all before or after the Chunin exams. And since all of us have our headbands, I can safely say that we are already ninja. This means that Lee is definitely with Guy, and that Shika and I are on our teams. At least Naruto wouldn't have to redo the academy again. Damn it, Ruto. Shikamaru ground out in frustration. A little heads up would have been nice. I mean, you grabbed our wrists and literally the chakra from us. I can feel that I don't even have a tenth of what I did just before we left. You think it's bad for you? Naruto scoffed. Right now, Kurama is probably sleeping. That jutsu drained nearly all of his chakra. Our link is gone for now. I'll estimate that in a month or two, he'll be back and better than ever. But even without his chakra, this body can't handle my adult reserves. If we don't start training, then all of us, Lee, you too, will have mass chakra overloads that will short-circuit our bodies and kill us. The seriousness in the Hokage's voice silenced Shikamaru and Lee. Naruto-kun, Lee said slowly, don't take this the wrong way, but it's very scary to hear you talk so. Lee couldn't find the word he wanted to say. So intelligently. Shikamaru finished. It's kind of hard to believe that Uzumaki, Namikaze Naruto, the boy who couldn't say chakra correctly, ended up fulfilling his dream and becoming the most powerful man since the Rakuto Sennin. A bitter smile crossed Naruto's face. If I was so powerful, why couldn't I save them? We won, but they lost. He shook his head, blue eyes looking much older than they should. And that's why we're back. You said it yourself, Naruto. We're here to save them. Shikamaru said forcefully, clapping his brother in arms on the shoulder. Yash! Lee shouted, his voice piercing the stillness of the night. This time, Naruto and Shikamaru just smiled at him. It was nice to hear this side of Lee after so many years. He hadn't been the same since Guy had died. We will do it. I have faith in us, and Kurama-san. All three faces turned to the moon and the stars that twinkled around it. All shining brightly, all mocking them. There was no moon in the future, just a black sky. There was no hope in the future, just darkness. But now they had been given a chance to change everything, a chance to keep that moon there, a chance to keep the world intact. And no one would be able to stop them from doing so. Not even Kami himself. The three of them simply stared at the moon until it disappeared under the cover of the clouds. An unnaturally warm breeze swept through the air. It was like the sweet caress of a mother, soothing and comforting the weary travelers who deserved the warmth more than anyone. Shikamaru turned to his companions, his fingers pressed against his forehead. I just want to say this again. Lee and Naruto stared at him, mentally urging him to go on. We're in the past. We came from the future, and we're in the godforsaken past. What about the words time travel do you not understand? Naruto deadpanned, wiping his hands on his pants. You do realize, Naruto, that you have turned the laws of our world completely upside down and backwards. The Nara plopped onto the ground, trying to stop the impending headache that was growing in the back of his head. You've made the impossible possible. He sighed. How troublesome. Lee piped in cheerily. Though he too was baffled at the sheer enormity of what had just taken place, now was not the time to think about it. They would have too much time later on. A small smirk was present on Naruto's face. Well, he began mischievously, they don't call me the #1 most unpredictable ninja for no reason. You forgot the knucklehead part. Shikamaru scowled before he allowed his lips to twitch upward slight. Unpredictable indeed. The trio's eyes met, their expressions partially curious, partially awe-stricken. And then something unexpected happened. They laughed. It was a sound that none of them had heard for a long time, so long that it sounded foreign to their own ears. But the childish laughter that bubbled out from the pit of their stomachs was like music to their own ears. Their voices, higher-pitched due to the adolescent hormones, twined together, creating a marvelous symphony. Lee wiped away the tears of mirth from his eyes and watched as his best friends clutched their stomachs. At the same time, they fell silent, just observing one another. They had been given a second chance. They would right all the wrongs. Oi, Ruto. Shikamaru turned to his blonde friend. Nani, how much of our power do you think we have? It was a valid question, and one that Naruto had the answer to. Kurama told me that he would use half of my chakra to complete the jutsu to bring us back. But I drew chakra from you too as well. This means that I am at about 66% of my adult chakra reserves, and you guys might be at about 80% or so. Why don't we feel the drain? Lee asked. After their initial uncoordinated movements, the three of them had been fine within minutes. This was a serious abnormality. Weren't they supposed to be completely drained of chakra instead of feeling fine? You will if you try to use the same techniques as you did all the time, maybe. Naruto answered, a pensive expression on his face. He rubbed his head for a few moments before snapping his fingers as if coming to an epiphany. Let me try something. He put his hands in the customary two-handed seal he was so famous for. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Immediately, 5 clones popped out, all of them dressed in the horrible orange jumpsuit that Naruto was so proud of. With a snap of the real Naruto's fingers, 3 clones vanished. Rasengan. Naruto ordered the remaining 2. The 2 clones saluted and within seconds, the Yondaimi's prized technique was formed. Seconds later though, the jutsu spread out rapidly, almost like Naruto's Rasen Shuriken, and then vanished with a loud bang, causing the 3 to take cover in case it hit them. The real Naruto stumbled slightly, a frown on his face. Just as I thought, he muttered. Just as he was about to turn to face his friends, he felt his foot was trapped in something. Looking around, he saw Shikamaru crouched on the ground, his hands in the rat seal. Ah! Naruto was caught in Shikamaru's shadow. Kage Nui. Shikamaru grunted, watching as his shadows branched into tendrils, one catching Naruto, the other Lee. But then the tendrils crept farther out, until they covered an area that Shikamaru had not set, the entire valley. With some effort, he held it there for at least half a minute before the chakra drain became too much. Shikamaru straightened and brushed the dirt off of his clothes. He looked at Naruto with narrowed eyes. So this means that you can't do the Hiraishin no Jutsu either. Naruto shook his head with disappointment. No, I may have perfected Two-chan's jutsu to the point where the tri-prong kunai was almost unnecessary, but I think that it's best to hold off on doing that jutsu. Tsunade Ba-chan has to give me what Two-chan left to me. I only got his stuff after the war started, and if we are going to win this thing, then I need my inheritance in the next couple years. They were distracted by a tree crashing to the ground via the courtesy of Lee. The man, boy, came back to the other two with a sullen expression. I just kicked it. We need to train ourselves. Naruto surmised, chuckling at Lee's pouting face. Like I said earlier, we still have our adult reserves which are at least 10 times bigger than what we had as kids. Now that we are kids, our bodies don't know what to do with the excess chakra, which is why we can't control the techniques that are like second nature to us. Plus this training will ensure that I'm not a runt. He added the last part in an undertone, lamenting as he looked over his skinny and underdeveloped body. We are truly doomed if training is not done properly. Lee wailed, pointing to the downed tree. Now that I am over the shock of time travel and the initial pain of my body, I feel overly energetic. Naruto nodded grimly. What we need is conditioning. Mental and physical. Our chakra circuits are haywire right now. Until everything's regulated, we're going to be on chakra surges. Like a sugar rush, but worse. Shikamaru grumbled. I understand now. Without control, we could kill everything in our paths. Even Madara. Shikamaru thought morbidly before hastily dispelling the wayward idea. It would be suicide to take on Madara, if they could even find him, with the power he had now. Yash! Lee exclaimed exuberantly. Now we can do even more rigorous training. I truly cannot wait. Inwardly, Lee grinned at the pained faces that his friends had. They were in for the training of a lifetime. Naruto and Shikamaru groaned simultaneously before all three burst into laughter once again. Oh Kami! Lee was going to be a nightmare. But they had to train in order to gain more power, there were no two ways about it. Speaking of power, Sasuke. Naruto muttered the name with disgust, effectively eliminating the cheerful atmosphere. Cerulean eyes stared at the shadowy outlines of Senju Hashirama and Uchiha Madara. How ironic was it that he and Sasuke had once fought in this same place. Sasuke, descendant of Uchiha Madara, versus Naruto, relative of the Senju clan. It was Senju versus Uchiha all over again, just a new generation and new tribulations. Hell, just like in the original fight, the Kyuubi was involved as well. History had a bad way of repeating itself. Will you try and save him? Lee asked quietly. Save him? Naruto scoffed, much to the surprise of the other two. Save that asshole, he's beyond saving. Though he had promised Itachi that he would bring back Sasuke, it just couldn't be done, not with all that Sasuke had done, who he had killed to achieve his ultimate goal. Shikamaru assessed his friend with calculating eyes. No one ever knew when Naruto had stopped thinking that he could bring Sasuke back and when he had started calling the Uchiha his enemy. During the war, there had come a point where Naruto was dealt with harsh truths. When Neji died, the first out of their friends, that was when Shikamaru had first seen the shadow of the Naruto to come. He was pretty sure that was when Naruto had his first cold-blooded kill as well. Neji's death had pushed Naruto to the limit. That was when Naruto had realized that even though he was one of the most powerful people on the battlefield, it wasn't enough. Shikamaru had seen what a ruthless Naruto could do, and he had seen how unforgiving his best friend was when it came to people hurting his friends. The glint in Naruto's eyes as he took down his enemies one by one, it was truly bone-chilling. How do you know, Naruto? How do you know that Sasuke is beyond redemption? After all, he's just a kid at the moment. Why can't we stop him? Shikamaru prodded gently. The scowl on Naruto's face deepened, his face masked by shadows. I just do, okay. A long time ago, before I knew Kurama's name, he told me that Sasuke was consumed with hatred from the beginning. And he told me that I knew this as well. The fox was right. Sasuke has been hell-bent on killing Itachi since the massacre. Even after he knew the truth of his clan's death, he still wanted to destroy us. Naruto faltered slightly as the weight of old memories haunted him. I can't let my so-called brotherly love for him cloud my judgment again. The man-turned-boy let out a deep breath. Jiraiya-sensei, Tsunade Ba-chan, everyone except for Sakura who was in love with the Tem, you all told me that Sasuke was lost cause and that I shouldn't waste my time on him. But I didn't listen because I was so stubborn. I thought I could change him. That was my naivety speaking. He grabbed a fistful of grass and tore it from its roots. I was a damned fool. Naruto closed his eyes and tilted his head to the heavens, a gesture of surrender. His friends looked at him with a combination of surprise and pity, though they knew Naruto hated pity. Those eyes, Lee thought somberly, those wary eyes don't belong on the face of a 12-year-old. I'm sure that if I looked in a mirror, my eyes would look exactly like Naruto's, Shikamaru's too. We've changed. Lee mused out loud. Perhaps too much. No one so much as blinked at the tone in Lee's voice. It was the truth. After Shikaku's death, Shikamaru's laziness had pretty much disappeared. After Temari's death, which included his unborn child, Nara Shikamaru was the embodiment of his clan. A shadow. He was his enemy's worst nightmare, striking from the darkness with frightening efficiency. Lee had changed as well. Almost as much as Naruto. Guy had died a year after the war began, taken down while fighting Kabuto himself. And then Kabuto had used Guy's mutilated corpse to wreak panic throughout the alliance, killing Tenten in the process, leaving Lee as the sole member of Team Guy. The last words that the reanimated man had said to his favorite student were, "I'm proud of you." This was right before Lee had pierced a kunai into his sensei's already dead heart. In light of Guy's death, Lee had gone into a frenzy, which had given him the moniker Konoha no Midori Kimono, Konoha's green beast, just like Guy. Afterwards, Lee was so ashamed of the carnage he had caused, it took the combined efforts of Naruto and Kakashi to coax him out of his stupor. You're right, Naruto murmured. We have changed. People are going to notice. I don't think that any of us can act as we did 10 years ago. I certainly can't pretend to be the dobe I was. Shika, you can't go back to being the lazy bastard that you were. And Lee, I haven't heard you so much as whisper youth since the war began. We've been through too much to even act. That would look even more unnatural. The wind picked up again, this time, considerably colder, as if telling them to get a move on. They shivered, perhaps noticing for the first time that it was night time. I don't want to leave you two alone, Shikamaru said suddenly. Not tonight, he added in a softer voice. Lee's eyes widened while Naruto sighed ruefully. Both Lee and Naruto were orphans. They lived alone with no one's protection besides the sandaime who didn't check up on all the orphans living alone on a daily basis. They understood that in his own way, Shikamaru was trying to make them feel a bit less alone after coming back 10 years in the past. 6 years of war, and not a single night of decent sleep, it was the least he could do to offer them a nice bed to sleep in and friends that they could talk to. But Naruto's smile vanished when he remembered what time they were in. This was before he had gained the respect of the village. They still hated him. Would the Nara clan even allow him to be there? Oh hell no. The Nara yelled before Naruto could say anything else. You're not going to pull the I won't be welcome bullshit, not now. Damn it Ruto. Your family. Like hell if I'm going to let you go to that ratty old apartment of yours. But, Naruto-kun. Naruto was cut off a second time, this time by Lee. Shikamaru-kun is correct. Tonight, I do not want to be alone. And deep down, neither do you. So please, don't argue. Plus, the Nara clan is comprised of the most intelligent people in Konoha. They know that you are not what you jail. Naruto looked at Lee and Shikamaru's impassive faces before sighing dramatically. He knew Lee was right. Fine. The grin was back. One night wouldn't hurt. Now, Naruto rubbed his hands gleefully, much to the fear of his friends. Let's see if I can still pull off a shushin. And without letting the other two say another word, Naruto grabbed their wrists, all three of them vanishing a swirl of leaves. It worked, Naruto said in disbelief as he stared at the Nara complex in front of him. It actually worked. Shikamaru stared at Naruto with an incredulous expression. You mean to say that you didn't know if it would work or not? You could have killed us. Lee chuckled at Naruto's sheepish expression and Shikamaru's furious one. The Nara shook his head and stared back at his home. The very home that had been destroyed in the past. Wait, now it was the future. Time travel is so troublesome, he though with a sigh. Looking at his home cemented the reality of it all. Naruto had actually brought them to the past, where his clan was still thriving, where there were still deer to tend, where he would play shogi with his dad and Asuma. Dad and Asuma. Shikamaru swallowed the lump in his throat as he thought about the two men. His dad had died while telling him to be strong, to be brave, that he loved him. The younger Nara had told Shikaku how good of a father he was, how he wished he had more time with him. And now, he could do it again. Hopefully this time, his dad wouldn't die, maybe Asuma wouldn't die. Shikamaru knew that some things were meant to happen though, and he knew that Naruto knew this as well. A war was coming. They couldn't stop the war, but they could be better prepared, have more allies earlier on. Some people were going to die, there were some that they couldn't save. But more importantly, there were those that they could. And that's who they would concentrate on. Behind him, Naruto and Lee were silently appraising their dark-haired friend. He'll be all right, Lee said confidently. We all will be. Naruto kept his eyes on Shikamaru, wondering how the Nara would react. He certainly wouldn't know what to do if the Yondaime appeared before him after years of death. Shikamaru turned to the other two who gave him silent nods of approval. With a deep breath, Shikamaru raised his hand and knocked on the huge door. Trepidation filled him as he waited for the doors to open, for his mother or father to greet him. Slowly, ever so slowly, the three of them could hear the unhurried footsteps of someone coming to the door. Shikamaru held his breath as the doors slid open to reveal the scarred face of Nara Shikaku. He looked younger, more relaxed. War had aged everyone past their actual ages. Naruto and Lee saw Shikamaru tense before relaxing. They knew how hard it must be for him to see his father after 6 long years. Shika. The elder Nara raised an eyebrow at his silent son, before taking a look at the boy's companions, both eyebrows raised high by now. Oh Yaji. It took all of Shikamaru's willpower to not throw himself in his dad's arms. He felt his eyes tear up ever so slightly, blinking rapidly to keep his emotions under control. It didn't matter that he had the mindset of a 22-year-old. This was his dad. Lee poked Shikamaru's back discreetly, causing the young Nara to jump slightly. Oh Yaji. He cleared his throat. I know it's late, but I was wondering if my friends, he gestured at Naruto and Lee, could sleep here tonight. Shikaku glanced at his only child for a long moment, wondering why his son was out this late, and why he wanted to bring friends over. Not even Choji had been over to spend the night. Shikamaru usually went over to the Akamichis. And these friends of his son, the Kyuubi host and the Nadaime guy. Since when did Shikamaru know those two well enough to bring them to the clan home? Shikaku would have prodded more, but he saw the three of them shiver in the cold. He also saw the undisguised fear in the smallest boy's eyes. That didn't sit right with Shikaku at all. He knew who Naruto was, of course. The jailer of the Kyuubi. And the Yondaime's son. You would have to be blind to not make the connection after all. But that fear, it was that of rejection, and something else. It was the expression of a boy who thought he was going to be attacked. Come in, you three. Shikaku stepped aside, watching as the odd trio hobbled into the house. What was even odder was the way they came in. His son and the other kid flanked Naruto. They flanked him, like they were guarding him. Shikaku narrowed his eyes but said nothing when they took their shoes off and kept them in the proper space. His son turned to him, as did the other two. There was something in his kid's eyes that he couldn't quite place. Something different. Actually, all of those three kids had that same thing in their eyes. It looked like weariness. Those eyes, especially the ones on Naruto, how very strange. They looked like the eyes of those who had experienced many battles. What could have happened to make these kids have those eyes? Had he been that bad of a parent that he hadn't seen this shift in his own son? It was then that he saw Naruto take in a sharp breath as the boy placed a hand on Shikamaru's shoulder. Sugoi. The child murmured quietly. What? Shikamaru asked as he watched Naruto examine his home. The chakra in your house, it's beautiful. Naruto was surprised that he still had the ability to detect chakra. He thought that he would have to hone this skill again, but it seemed as though it was still there. The Uzumaki clan, like Mito-sama and Karen, were chakra sensors. His mother didn't have this ability, though her special chakra was tied to controlling chakra such as the Kyuubi's, as opposed to reading it. In the future, Naruto was able to read a person's chakra even without being shrouded in Kurama's chakra. Now that threw Shikaku severely off balance. This kid could sense the chakra in his house. What chakra? He had never felt any chakra in this house. Can you explain that sentence, young man? Shikaku asked Naruto. Naruto jumped, forgetting that Shikamaru's father was still here. How could he be so stupid as to let something like that slip? They weren't even back for a couple hours and he was already screwing things up. He really was Adobe. Well, it's just that everyone has their own unique chakra, right? And the Nara clan, well, you have your own special chakra within the uniqueness of individual chakra, so that energy is reflected within your home. Shikaku was still puzzled. For all his genius, he wasn't understanding what the boy was talking about. I don't see what this has to do with you sensing the chakra in my home. The boy twiddled his thumbs and looked to Shikamaru for support. His son, much to Shikaku's amusement, was looking at Naruto with an expectant expression. Traitor. He heard Naruto grumble before the kid took another deep breath. I just mean that because your clan uses the same type of techniques, and even since everyone is related, the chakra is similar, therefore the chakra resonates here. It's nearly palpable. It creates this warm feeling that covers you. It makes someone feel safe, protected even. That's why I said it was beautiful. Naruto stopped, and looked at the man in an almost expectant manner. Shikaku scrutinized Naruto thoroughly. Resonates. Palpable. From what he had heard of the kid, Naruto was supposed to be a complete dunce with no skill at all besides creating shadow clones and having too much chakra. But here he was, sensing the chakra in his home, chakra which he didn't know about, and using vocabulary that he shouldn't have to explain it. This made Shikaku wonder how much stuff about the child was true, and how much was made up. Interesting, he finally said, stifling a chuckle when Naruto let out a breath of relief. You must tell me more about this later. But for now, Shikamaru can take you to his room and someone will bring you 3 food. Come on. Shikamaru dragged his friends to his room after throwing a quick goodbye to his father. Shikaku saw how Lee and Naruto's shoulders slumped in a casual sort of manner, how Shikamaru smirked at the two of them and threw an arm around Naruto in a brotherly fashion, how Lee gazed at the two fondly before shaking his head. This level of comfort wasn't something developed overnight. No, this camaraderie took years to build. This was yet another mystery that he was determined to solve. As he watched them leave, Shikaku felt Yoshino come next to him. So that's him, huh? Uzumaki Naruto. Namikaze Naruto. Shikaku absently corrected her. His wife smiled next to him. Ah, he's more Uzumaki, I think. He's Kushina's kid all right. I've heard him around the village after he's sent the TI department on a goose chase. Datbeo this and Datbeo that. It's exactly like Kushina's databane. Did you hear what he said? Of course, Yoshino replied. Smart kid, and talented too. I learned something today about my own clan. She paused momentarily before continuing. He's a sensory type. Did Shikamaru ever mention being friends with him? Yoshino shook her head. No, not with him, or the other one. She glanced at her husband. You're not going to interrogate him, are you? No, not yet. He added to himself. Shikamaru will tell us when he wants to. But in the meantime, we have 3 growing teens in our home. I think that they need to be fed. Yoshino's face changed immediately, causing Shikaku to take 2 steps back. Now what had he said? Are you insinuating, his wife started dangerously, that I will be the one to feed them? That women should only be in the kitchen? You insensitive, misogynistic, bah. Not at all, dear. Shikaku hurried to rectify the situation, knowing his wife's temper was incredibly volatile. In fact, why don't I give them something? Yes, I'll do that. You go to bed. Yoshino watched with a smirk as her husband scurried away. Works every time. In the safety of Shikamaru's room, the trio began analyzing everything. Firstly, based on the calendar, they concluded that it had been approximately 2 months since Shikamaru and Naruto had become genin. This meant that the famous journey to Wave mission had already taken place. It also meant that in another month or so, all 3 rookie teams plus Team Guy would be entered into the Chunin exams. Listen guys, Shikamaru spewing out random ideas. The reason Orochimaru got to Sasuke was because he was disguised as a kunoichi, right? Naruto nodded, not sure where this was going. So what if we weren't in the Chunin exams? What if our senseis decided we weren't ready? Lee shook his head sadly. Shikamaru-kun, that won't work. If Orochimaru doesn't find Sasuke in the Forest of Death, then he will another way, and that other way will be much worse, I fear. We must change things. I agree with that, but if we are not entered into the Chunin exams, then the change will be too drastic. Lee's right. Naruto spoke. Orochimaru wants Sasuke more than anything. But all Sasuke wanted from him was power. Even if Orochimaru doesn't put his seal on him, then he'll lure him out of the village with the promise of power. And knowing the Tem, he'll leave. In the long run, Sasuke kills Orochimaru. I don't know if we can stop Sasuke from leaving the village, but we must try. But most likely, you're saying that Sasuke will defect. Shikamaru concluded. Naruto's grim expression said it all. Damn Uchiha. That pretty much summed up everyone's view of that cursed clan. Naruto leaned against the wall. This day had been long. From watching Konoha burn, to coming to the past, to being here in this room. It felt surreal. Naruto-kun. Lee jumped up suddenly. Nani, you could do Rasengan. I know. Not well though. Naruto sighed with disappointment. Lee shook his head in excitement. No, I mean that even before you would learn it in the original timeline, you knew it. This means that we've retained the knowledge of what our future selves can do, and even how to do it. All we need now is the control and stamina to do it, just as you said. Shikamaru's eyes lit up, as did Naruto's. That means I could still summon. Naruto trailed off excitedly. Summoning was not bound by time and space. His toads would still believe him to be the Naruto of the future. But if he tried it, he might end up summoning Gamabunta and he wouldn't be able to explain their presence in Konoha without revealing the truth about himself and his two companions. Oh, thank Kami. Shikamaru sighed, letting himself fall on his bed. But we still have much work to do to catch up to our future selves. Naruto added seriously, I highly doubt I could pull off a summoning jutsu right now. Shikamaru threw a pillow at him. Way to be a downer. Naruto just smirked. Hey, I'm a realist. I was since the day I screamed that I would be Hokage. I knew it would happen. I still can't believe that. Shikamaru muttered. A loud mouth like you became the most powerful person in our village, hell, maybe even the 5 nations. Except for Madara and Obito. Naruto said bitterly, echoing what he had said some time back in the valley. It is absolutely unthinkable and unimaginable that Kakashi-sensei's old friend, the one for whom he went to the memorial for every day, was the one who released the Kyuubi and destroyed Konoha, twice. Lee griped. You should have seen him when Obito revealed himself. Naruto said sadly, I think he believed that it was his fault this had all happened. He took that guilt to the grave. But we will change this. Change it all. Lee stated firmly. Yes, yes we will. Shikamaru reaffirmed, yawning loudly, realizing just how tired he was both mentally and physically. This has been a very troublesome day. I'm beat. We all are. Naruto groaned as he stretched. But tomorrow will be even more troublesome. So prepare yourselves. Naruto the brat was replaced with Naruto the Hokage, causing Shikamaru and Lee to sit a bit straighter out of habit. Rest up guys. We're going to need it. When Shikaku came to knock on the door to deliver food, he was greeted with the sight of 3 sleeping children, each of them curled up into small balls, a content expression on each of their faces. He looked at the food in his hand and back at them, a rueful smile on his face. Though he was tempted to wake them, he let them sleep. They could eat tomorrow. As he left the room, he saw Yoshino snap a picture of the 3 sleeping boys, neither of them knowing that this was the most sleep they had gotten in 6 years, not knowing that tonight, in this room, a major shift had just taken place. Right here, slept the future leaders of Konoha. And right here, the future of Konoha had just been altered. Wake up. Shikamaru was woken up by someone yelling in his ear. Leave me alone. He slurred, shutting off all the noise by placing a pillow over his head. Shika. A new voice joined in his torture. Go away. Naruto and Lee grinned at each other. Their lazy friend was living up to his clan's reputation. Unbeknownst to them, Shikaku, who had heard the commotion and wondered why the kids would be up at 6 o'clock, opened the door and was watching what was going on with amused eyes. Awaken young grasshopper. Lee flashed a smile-worthy guy at the still sleeping Nara. Shut up sensei. Shikamaru's voice was muffled under the blankets and pillows. It was amazing to Shikaku how much the expression on Naruto's face resembled Kushina's whenever she had pulled a prank on Minato or Jiraiya. Shika, wake up or Lee will unleash the springtime of youth on you. Shikaku wondered just how well Naruto knew his son for his son to allow the other boy to call him Shika. Not even Choji called him that. He had no idea that under his lazy exterior, Shikamaru had a mysterious side. Naruto-kun, Lee began in a grave tone. I fear that you must use it. Yes, Naruto replied in the same tone. I must use it. The look he gave Shikamaru was not a pleasant one at all. Forgive me my friend, but you leave me no other choice. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Naruto intoned grimly. What he was about to do did not match the tone of his voice. Silently, 14 clones popped into existence before Naruto looked at them in exasperation and dispelled all but one. Much to Shikaku's pleasure and amusement, the clone was an exact replica of Yoshino. "Let's go, Lee." Shikaku quickly moved away so the two boys wouldn't see him. He noted the downright wicked expressions they wore and decided he must see what was going to happen. Immediately, the transformed clone started hitting the poor boy who was rattled out of his senses. Shikaku closed the door when the yelling began, a smile on his face. He would have to try Naruto's trick the next time Shikamaru didn't wake up. "I hate you both," a battered Shikamaru mumbled as he plopped down next to his best friends who were eating breakfast prepared by Yoshino, who had been told what had happened by a mirthful Shikaku. "You could have just woken up," Naruto pointed out. "Then we wouldn't have had to do that. It was either that, or Lee showing you the springtime of youth." Both boys looked to their spandex-clad friend who flashed them a bright smile. They shuddered, thinking of crashing waves and sunsets that appeared out of nowhere. Naruto's wake-up was much better than Lee's would have been. "I'm curious though, Naruto-san," Shikaku spoke from across the table. The smile that had been on the boy's face vanished instantaneously, and was replaced by a look of wariness. Interesting and disturbing. He knew the kid had led a hard life, but this was the behavior of a person who was constantly watching for danger wherever he was. No 12-year-old should behave this way. He would have to have a talk with the Hokage. Yes, Nara-sama, using the formal suffix was best whilst talking to a clan head, but the Inoshika-cho heads were a bit different. As expected, Shikaku waved his hand. "Come now, none of that Sama stuff. Just Shikaku or whatever is fine. Why are you boys waking up so early?" Yoshino paused in what she was doing and watched as the trio exchanged slightly melancholic looks. "What in the world? It's not early, Shikaku-san." "Shikaku-san," Lee said, "we just didn't want to be late for training." "Not training with our senseis," Naruto added hurriedly, seeing the suspicious looks on the elder Nara's face. "Training with just us. See, the three of us wanted to improve, and there's strength in numbers, right? So we decided to train together. That way, we would get feedback and encouragement from each other." Shikaku nodded slowly, not quite believing them, but that story was plausible. It did explain the friendship, but certainly not the deep-seated trust that these three had in each other. The way they acted was betraying the true nature of this friendship. It was highly noticeable by the way they threw glances around, the way they communicated non-verbally, the wake-up call in the morning. All of these things were clues that they had known each other for far longer than they were letting on. Naruto rose from his seat, the other two following quickly. Once again, there was this feeling that Shikaku had that told him that Naruto was the leader in this group. Judging by the way his wife raised her eyebrows, she thought so as well. "Thank you for the meal, Yoshino-san. It was delicious. And thank you for letting us stay." He bowed to her, as did Lee. Naruto truly meant what he said. The war didn't allow them to eat properly, sleep properly, or enjoy life in general. Sleeping for this long was a luxury. "It wasn't a problem," she said, her voice slightly shaky. Kushina's child, Minato's child, the one she had never checked on, was bowing to her for something she didn't deserve. "Yane, Ka-san, Oyaji," Shikamaru said quietly, leaving the room with Naruto and Lee in tow. The last two turned and waved to their elders before catching up to Shikamaru. "Now that's something you don't see every day," Yoshino remarked quietly. She picked up the photo she had snapped yesterday of the boys and pasted it carefully to the fridge. "He's changed. Shikamaru has changed quite a bit. He didn't even say Mendoks at all." The Nara matriarch looked to her husband. "Do you believe them, when they say that they started training together?" "Yes and no. I'm not sure what, but those kids are definitely hiding something." "But what?" Yoshino questioned with a sigh. "What's going on?" Shikaku entwined his fingers and rested them under his chin. I don't know, but I intend to find out. Do you think the boy knows about his burden? And if so, could he have told Shikamaru and Lee-kun? It's possible, but let's not make assumptions just yet. Shikaku stood and stretched. Let's just wait and see. From the distance, he could see the sun shining brightly. A small smile played on his face. It was the dawn of a new day. Training Field 10 was completely destroyed. In the middle lay 3 teens, panting and thoroughly worn to the ground. It was just past 8, and their training torture had been going on for about 2 hours. They knew that their chakra control was pretty bad when neither of them could climb a tree without blowing the bark off it. They knew it was worse when Shikamaru's shadow techniques possessed every living thing in sight, such as rabbits and squirrels and Naruto and Lee. They knew it was atrocious when Lee randomly used too much inner chakra while performing his Konoha Senpu, which caused him to destroy 4 trees with just 1 kick. They knew it was horrendous when Naruto tried cutting 1 leaf with wind chakra and ended up leaving an entire tree without leaves. The problem was that they had too much chakra, and no way to properly control it. That's why they had to refine it, distill it down to appropriate levels. Naruto and Shikamaru could still execute Shushins without any trouble because that didn't require any control. The chakra simply flowed. To put it simply, the 3 of them could do the basics and nothing more. They were ridiculously strong genin with the reserves of jonins, and in Naruto's case, kages. But they could do only the simplest of the simple because everything else resulted in chaos and explosions. If they didn't perfect chakra control, Lee wouldn't use his taijutsu properly, Naruto wouldn't be able to do a Rasengan, and Shikamaru's kage jutsus would be imprecise. They could end up destroying all of Konoha, hell, maybe even the world. It's official. Naruto tried to control his harsh breathing. Couldn't you make one of those seal things that you made in the war? Shikamaru asked Naruto hopefully. Due to his ancestry, sealing was in Naruto's blood, and once he had started his sealing training, he had never stopped. From gravity seals to chakra enhancement, you name it and Naruto could make it. No, I mean, yes, I probably could if I had a couple days, but we can't take the easy way out. Seals won't do a damn thing. Training is slower, yet it is more efficient and will have better effects on us in the long run. Seals cannot be our crutch. Naruto examined a simple gravity seal that he had drawn this morning and placed in his pouch. He was still a bit rusty due to his terrible handwriting, but he had at least a month to perfect them so he could use seals during the Chunin exams. I agree with Naruto-kun. We cannot depend on a seal, Lee said, standing up again. How troublesome. Shikamaru groaned, popping his shoulder back into place. I know it is, but we need to re-assimilate, get back to where we were before we did the time warp. Naruto clapped his friend on the back, grinning when Shikamaru winced. Speaking of which, Shikamaru appraised Naruto's jumpsuit with disdain. It was torn and dirty. You want to get back to where we were, then get some new clothes. That abomination is not what my future Hokage will wear. Naruto looked at his clothing, reminiscing about the good times he had with his jumpsuit. But Shikamaru was right, he needed to change his clothing. The problem was, I can't, Shika. Why not, Naruto-kun? Lee asked. Well, for one, if I change, then people are going to get suspicious. Our personalities have already hanged into something that no one really expects from us, so my clothing can't change. And second, Naruto chuckled sadly, the reason why I have this suit is because it's the only thing that the store owners would let me buy without overcharging me. Shikamaru and Lee looked at their future leader with a mixture of sadness and understanding. No child should have faced what Naruto had. When they had first learned of Naruto's burden, the rookie 9+ team guy minus Sasuke had been appalled. Not because Naruto was the carrier of the Kyuubi, but because finally they understood why he had received all those dirty looks, why everyone had ignored him for so long. Sakura had taken it the worst because she remembered how her parents had told her to stay away from Naruto. And the others, they had been disappointed in the village that they adored. Their friend was a hero, not a pariah. Shikamaru had discussed this with both his father and Asuma at length. As it turned out, the shinobi of the village were better at understanding Naruto's condition. But save for a precious handful, those shinobi were neutral when it came to Naruto, and many had discouraged him from becoming a ninja for they feared what the demon inside of him might do if let loose. He had been so alone until he became a ninja. Only Iruka or the Sandaime had paid any real attention to him. If they hadn't, then Shikamaru feared that Naruto may have turned into someone like Gaara. Wisely, the two of them dropped the subject. It's going to be hard. Naruto's voice changed, the Hokage in him taking charge. He met the eyes of his former, future subordinates. In a short while, we'll meet with our teams again. People who were dead yesterday will be alive today. I can say with full certainty that Shikaku-san is not convinced that we are who we are. I saw the looks he was giving us. However, that's expected of the Nara clan. Our senseis are more perceptive than we give them credit for. They will notice something different. He took a deep breath. But, it's our job to at least try and pretend as if those people weren't once dead. To protect them, we have to try, and then try again. Naruto's hands clenched into tight fists. I'm going to have to look at Sasuke and not want to kill him. I'm going to have to watch as Sakura fawns over the bastard. But I'm not going to watch him kill her, not this time. I'm not going to let Kakashi-sensei be taken down by Obito. I'm not going to let Tsunade Ba-chan or Shizune-chan or Ero Sennin or Iruka-sensei be taken from me. Not if I can help it. And Lee's voice cracked, his eyes were filling with tears as he remembered his fallen team as well. Guy-sensei, Neji, Tenten. Besides you two, they are my family. I will try to get along with this younger Neji. Asuma, Choji, Ino. My team. My responsibility. Shikamaru raised his fist to Naruto and Lee and smirked. I'm no killer bee, but this would be the perfect time to bump fists. Smiling, Lee and Naruto touched their fists to Shikamaru's. It was a shame they didn't have a rap to match the fist bump. It was a promise, a vow, they're Nindo. They wouldn't give up, not now, not ever. That was something that Shikamaru and Lee had learned from their Hokage. Across the village, Nara Shikaku stood in front of his Hokage. The Sandaime took in his head Jonin and gestured for him to sit. Shikaku, you wanted to speak. The elder Nara nodded. Did you know that Uzumaki Naruto is a sensory type? He asked without preamble. The Sandaime's eyes widened. What? Are you sure? Absolutely sure. Last night, my son invited the boy and another genin to stay over. The first thing Naruto said was, and I quote, "The chakra in your house is beautiful." Shikaku watched as his leader leaned forward. The expression on the old man's face was one surprise and shock. Two things stood out from your statement. 1. Naruto has never willingly gone to someone's house. Even when I requested he stay with me for a night, he refused. This tells me that Naruto either trusts you implicitly, or your son. As for him being a censor, nothing has ever suggested that he should have this skill. Shikaku snorted derisively. Do you really think that anything that his teachers reported is accurate? That boy is talented, Hokage-sama. He's polite and articulate. He called me Nara-sama. And when I talked to him, he was scared of me. I don't know what the hell the academy is doing. This bias against him has gone on for far too long. No one knows that child for who he really is. From the corner, Shikaku spotted a hidden ambush shuffle slightly. He knew who that was. Tori, a good man, but too rigid, and he was one of the few who had wanted Naruto to be taken under Anbu protection permanently when he was younger. His real name was Tenzo or Yamato or something like that. The Hokage took a long puff of his pipe and watched the ringlets float up. What Shikaku had said was disturbing, but it was probably correct. Besides Iruka, no one had properly paid attention to Naruto. It was Iruka who had taught the child to read properly, who had taken him under his wing. If it weren't for the scarred Chunin, then Naruto would not be the bundle of sunshine that he was. The boy didn't trust easily at all, but when he did, it was unconditional trust. "I've tried," Hiruzen said softly, "to uphold the Yondaime's wishes and make the village see him as a hero. But people are blind to what's underneath the underneath, as Kakashi would say. They see what they want to see, and though I wish it weren't so, I can't change that. Naruto though, he can change that, and I have faith that he will. If what you say is true, then it would seem as though that sneaky brat has been hiding these skills. I want to know what else he has been hiding as well. It's not just him, Hokage-sama, my son, and Rock Lee as well. The three of them have formed some sort of training group. They are all hiding something." The aged man puffed some more smoke out. Such an odd group. The trio was certainly not what he had expected Shikaku to report. "Very well. I will have Kakashi, Guy, and Asuma monitor them for any signs of unusual behavior." Shikaku stood and bowed. "Arigato, Hokage-sama." Hiruzen watched as his commander left the room, a dull ache forming in the pit of his stomach. His eyes traveled to the pictures on the wall, resting on one of a man with startling blue eyes and a shock of spiky blonde hair. "I've failed your son, Minato. I've failed the legacy that you and Kushina-chan left behind." The old man whispered sadly. "Tori, Suru," he barked, changing emotions within a heartbeat. Immediately, two Anbu appeared in front of him. "Hi, Hokage-sama," they murmured in unison. "Get me all the files on Uzumaki Naruto immediately." They vanished silently, leaving a brooding Hokage to his own thoughts. Naruto, Shikamaru, and Lee, he thought, staring at the village that he loved and hated at the same time. What have you gotten yourselves into? If only you knew, Hokage-sama, if only you knew. This was it, the moment of truth. The moment where the three of them would see how well they could stick to being just genin. Naruto looked at Shikamaru, who looked at Lee, who looked back at Naruto. The nervousness was so thick that they could cut it with a knife. "All right, man." Naruto's smile was more like a forced grimace. "Listen, remember what I said. Pretend. Pretend that there is no Akatsuki right now, that there is no Madara or Obito. We are naive genin, slightly powerful naive genin. Nothing more, nothing less." His subordinates nodded sharply. "Hi, Hokage-sama," Naruto groaned. "And none of that either." He glared at his stomach when they smirked at him. "This is all your fault, you stupid fox. Mendokes." Shikamaru snorted, though the noise was tinged with apprehension. Spoken like a true Nara. His Hokage scowled at him, though being back in his 12-year-old short body didn't quite have the same effect on Shikamaru as it did when Naruto was a fully grown and tall Kage. "Tch, whatever." Naruto fingered his empty neck, truly wishing that he would have the pendant of the Shadaime with him for comfort. That stone had a reserve of chakra in it that always calmed Naruto. He would win his necklace back from Tsunade, no matter what. "But you're right, Ruto, this is all too troublesome." Shikamaru watched the clouds shift from one shape to the next. "I really need a drag right now. You are very lucky Tamari or Kurenai-sensei aren't here right now," Naruto stated with a reminiscent smile. Those two used to bop the poor Nara over the head every time he started smoking. "I'll see them soon," Shikamaru whispered softly, his mind racing through the memories he had of them, the good, the bad, and the ugly. "And I shall see my precious flower as well," Lee declared, his eyes misting at the thought of the woman who had captured his being. Lee, you and Ayame-chan is something that no one could believe. Naruto grinned. Speaking of Ayame, ramen. He couldn't wait to have that heavenly taste in his mouth after 4 years of not having any. Ichiraku ramen had been destroyed 2 years after the war began, killing both Chuki and Ayame. Naruto and Lee's siege on Madara's forces would have gone down in history books, again, if Konoha would have survived. And what about you, Hokage-sama? The Nara waggled his eyebrows at. What about me? Naruto narrowed his eyes at the expressions on both Lee and Shikamaru's faces. A certain Hyuga perhaps. Shikamaru enjoyed the choked sound that his best friend made at the mere mention of her. Naruto's face turned a bright red at the thought of that very Hyuga. He had been so blind when it came to matters of the heart. Sakura had always been the object of his affection in his youth, so much so, that he couldn't see what was in front of him. Coming to the past meant that he would have to face her as well. In his timeline, nothing officially had happened between them, but he knew that if he or she had lived long enough, then something definitely would have. That is to say, unless Neji decided to kill him. I mean. Naruto cleared his throat and tried to sound as dignified as possible. Don't we all have to go meet our teams? This discussion will be held for another time. He cast shrewd glances at the other two who were trying to control their laughter but failing. Dismissed. And with that, Naruto shushined out, leaving behind a mass of leaves that came floating down. Lee snorted gleefully. Ah, young love, one can only find such happiness in the springtime of youth. Shikamaru finished, berating himself for being happy to hear Lee talk about youth again. That just showed how hideous the future was. There was no youth to talk about. They had grown into adults before they could even call themselves children. Yeah, I know. He watched the last leaf fall to the ground, sighing softly. Well, you heard our Hokage, let's go. Taking one last look at the carnage they had left behind, Konoha's future Kuroikage and Midori Kimono left the same way as the man who would one day be known as Tenno Shinobi. The Shinobi of the Heavens. Maeda Guy was usually the first one on the training field, but today, he was pleasantly surprised to find his prodigy, Lee, completing laps around the field on his hands. Tears came to the man's eyes. Such youth. It was absolutely breathtaking. His diligent pupil was just inspiring. Lee, my ever so youthful student. I will join you. Lee froze mid-handstand and looked at his sensei. The lump in his throat grew tenfold at seeing the original green beast of Konoha power walk towards him on his hands as well. Naruto had told him how hard this was going to be, and Lee himself knew as well. But seeing his idol here, the closest thing he had to a father, alive, whole, this was something that he couldn't have prepared for. Desperately trying to stop the tears in his eyes from falling, Lee did a backflip and landed on his feet, trying to muster up the brightest smile on his face. Guy-sensei, Lee said soft enough so only he would hear the affection in his own voice. Guy-sensei, Lee exclaimed louder, hoping that this exuberant proclamation would not make the older man suspect anything. Lee, Guy beamed proudly at his student. Your flames of youth have inspired me. Come, let us do 50 laps. Though Lee had already done about 75, he only grinned and followed his sensei. Everything was all right now. Things were settling in. No, Guy-sensei, we must do 100 laps. And with that, Lee sprinted in front of Guy, not seeing the fond expression on the man's face. Neji and Tenten had arrived to train around the same time as Guy did. The two genin watched as their teammate and sensei raced each other around the field with looks that ranged from exasperation to troubled acceptance. They're not going to make us do this too, are they? Tenten asked the Hyuga. Neji scoffed. Only they are crazy enough to actually pull something like this off. He scowled Guy and Mini Guy. His team was just so odd. When Tenten suggested that they train on their own, Neji wholeheartedly agreed. If he had turned around, he would have seen the wistful and remorseful look on Lee's face before it changed into one of fierce determination. I will protect you, all of you. Shikamaru appeared a good 20 meters away from his training field so that Asuma or anyone by the field wouldn't think that he had shushined in. Through habit, over the years his posture had straightened. Now, he consciously slouched as he made his way to the training area, his genius mind whirling about. Usually, Shikamaru would be the last one to training. It seemed that even time travel hadn't changed that. Already Shikamaru could make out the forms of Ino and Choji. Asuma must be somewhere behind them. The Nara forced himself to stop and regulate his breathing. He could feel his heart palpitating at unacceptable levels. This wasn't good. Asuma would know if anything was wrong with him. Even after just 1 month of being his student, Shikamaru and the Sarutobi had a strong bond. As his 3 team members came into sight, Shikamaru tried not to think about the last time he had seen any of them. Ino, her skull caved in and blood pooling all over her body. Choji, a blade piercing straight through his stomach, cutting open his organs from inside. Instantaneous death. Asuma, killed by Hidan, blood pouring out of countless wounds, a smile on his face as Shikamaru wept before vowing to avenge his sensei. Kurenai, clutching her expanding stomach at his funeral, one hand with her baby, the other in Shikamaru's. Konohamaru, sobbing for his last living relative, his face pressed into Naruto's chest as the blonde comforted the boy. Ino spotted him first, and he could see the annoyed expression on her face. If he were actually 12, he would have muttered, "Troublesome," and ignored her. But he wasn't 12, not in mind anyway. Therefore, seeing a chibi Ino simply brought a smile to his face. Shikamaru blinked rapidly as he saw his teacher exhale some smoke and raise a lazy hand at him. Choji was sitting under a tree, wolfing down a bag of chips as if there were no tomorrow. It was like nothing had ever changed. And for them, it hadn't. For them, it was just another day, but for him, it was the beginning of something far greater. Yo! The Nara raised a hand back at everyone, expertly concealing the turmoil that was hidden beneath the surface. Now then, Asuma rose and ran a hand through his beard. Since we're all here, why don't we begin on some training? Involuntarily, a smile spread on Shikamaru's face that could have rivaled Naruto's. These people here, they were his team, and he wasn't going to let them slip away from him again. And if they did, then Shikamaru would content himself with knowing that he did everything he could to save them. But in the meantime, he was going to make damn well sure that the worst-case scenario would not happen. Bring it, sensei. Shikamaru smirked. I'm ready. And he meant it. Naruto was not ready to meet his team. Not at all. First, Sasuke would be there. Second, Sakura would still be a raving fangirl. And third, he was supposed to be the blonde idiot, the one announcing that he would be the future Hokage, and not actually the future Hokage of Konoha. When Naruto looked back at his time as a genin, he realized that he was just stupid. Completely stupid. If he hadn't chased after both Sasuke and Sakura for the better part of his genin years, then he could have been a much better ninja earlier on. Sakura had turned into a good friend, almost like an older sister. But it had taken him way too much time to recognize the fact that Sasuke was her ideal man, that she wouldn't ever give up on him. When she had said that she loved him back in Iron Country, he couldn't believe the fact that she thought she could use his feelings for her to manipulate him. That had been the time when he truly saw that Sakura could not and would not let go of Sasuke. Even Ino had moved on to Sai. That was one odd couple though. And then there was Sasuke. While it was good for every kid to want to compete with someone else, Naruto had taken it too far with Sasuke. He wanted to challenge the Tem at every given opportunity, and Sasuke gave it all. Every time Naruto was even the slightest bit better than him, Sasuke would do everything to belittle Naruto and become the best again. In hindsight, Naruto knew that he should have let Sasuke go, but it was that stupid promise to Sakura and his stupid pride that wouldn't give up on him. Sasuke had never even truly been his friend, no matter how many times Naruto insisted it was the opposite. And now, this was his chance to change everything for the better. If he could become a better shinobi now, then the future would be so much brighter. On the other hand though, he could end up setting off a different course of events. Such is the quandary of time travel. Realistically, Naruto knew that he couldn't change Sasuke, which meant that Sasuke was going to leave Konoha one way or another. But, now he knew exactly where Sasuke was going to go, what he was going to do, and who he was going to meet, unless the future had changed. Hopefully, it had, but even more hopefully, not all aspects would have. Sasuke could have no part in the future of Konoha, especially not the destruction of it. Naruto sat in the middle of Training Ground 7, uprooting the grass by his sides, simply enjoying the solitude before his teammates came. He desperately wanted to try and perfect his jutsus and basic chakra control, but couldn't in the fear that he might blow something up. He sighed blissfully, knowing that his teammates wouldn't be here for another half hour, and Kakashi would be even later. Though he desperately wanted to pull a prank, he suppressed that urge, knowing that it would only infuriate his teammates further. He really didn't want to get on their bad sides this early on. From the training ground, Naruto could see all the heads of the cages. Tsunade's wasn't there yet, and for him, they couldn't put it because Hokage Mountain had been destroyed. It'll happen, Chu-chan, Ka-chan. One day, I'll be there next to Tsunade Ba-chan, Konoha's Orange Hokage, and you'll be watching me. He looked to the heavens and smiled softly, knowing that his mother and father would always be by his side, through thick and thin, his two sons. Suddenly, Naruto sat up, his eyes darting from here to there. What was that feeling? It felt familiar, but it never hurt to be too cautious. Slowly, he allowed himself to relax. There was no danger in Konoha, not at this time. Familiar meant good, it meant that, chakra. He was feeling someone's chakra. This was the second time it had happened, first at Shika's house, and now here. Eyes roving over the treetops, he scanned for the presence of a human life force. This was an interesting development. Though his skills were nowhere close to being as good as they were in the future, Naruto had still retained enough to sense a chakra presence in the vicinity. Still, someone had to be pretty close to him for Naruto to be able to sense them. As discreetly as he could, Naruto sunk back down to the ground, closing his eyes, trying to pinpoint the location. To his left, no. His right, 70 degrees and up to his right. He turned his head that precise measurement and followed the chakra up to a tree. There, he caught a sliver of silver hair peeking out and grinned, a nostalgic sigh escaping him. Kakashi, the sly bastard. He was observing this team every day. So that's what he did in his time, besides stare at the memorial and come up with all those ridiculous excuses. Naruto's good mood immediately shifted at the thought of the memorial stone. Obito, the man who Kakashi mourned for, was the very man who killed his sensei, who destroyed Konoha, who killed Kakashi. Obito was remorseless towards the last Hotake. No matter how many times Kakashi had recounted the tale of how he had to kill Rin, Obito never listened. But then again, Shikaku had told Naruto that negotiating and talking with them was pointless. The Uchiha had taken sadistic pleasure in torturing Kakashi before finally killing him. The sight of his tortured and gutted corpse had haunted Naruto every day. But he was alive here, and would stay alive. Shivering at his sorrowful thoughts, Naruto closed his eyes and contented himself by counting the minutes that Kakashi was in that tree, no doubt reading that perverted book of his. Hatake Kakashi was not a man who was easily surprised, and if he was surprised, then he hid it quite well. However, when his little blonde Gaki had pinpointed his exact location, that had thrown him off balance. So far, Kakashi had appeared at least an hour before training was supposed to begin, and just observed his genin. Unfortunately, what he saw never pleased him. They weren't a bad team, but they weren't a great one either. Before the wave mission, his team had been a mess. Teamwork was nearly non-existent. Sasuke and Naruto were continuously antagonistic towards the other. Naruto annoyed the hell out of Sakura. Sakura couldn't stand Naruto, and she fawned over Sasuke constantly, much to the Uchiha's anger. After the mission, subtle changes had happened. Sasuke and Naruto had built a shaky friendship. Naruto had really done well on the mission, besides the Kyuubi thing. Sasuke had finally awoken his Sharingan, and Sakura now knew that the life of a ninja wasn't as sparkly as she made it out to be. They were beginning to look more like a team, and less like a disaster. But, Kakashi could see the jealous look that Sasuke got whenever Naruto did something quicker than him. He could see how Sakura never defended the kid, and always gravitated to her crush, and he could see how Naruto would look so downtrodden one moment, and cheery the next. Even if the other two didn't know it, they were slowly alienating the last, and probably the most powerful member of their team. Kakashi kept his eyes on Naruto, watching him inhale and exhale deeply, a peaceful expression on his face. Guilt tore through the older man. He should have been there for this kid, but couldn't. Kakashi had been on Naruto's Anbu guard, giving the kid a stuffed dog and that ridiculous nightcap he wore, but that's it. The Sandaime had been extremely disappointed that Kakashi had ignored part of his family and wallowed in silence. Still though, Naruto could sense him. He hadn't shown this kind of skill before. This would be something to look into. With a shake of his head, Kakashi settled back down in the tree. He still had a good hour or so before he had to show up. It was time to see just how Yuki was a bad girl. Down below, Naruto's smile widened slightly as the sound of perverted giggles echoed through the air, hitting his enhanced sense of hearing. "It's good to have you back, sensei." Poke, twitching, poke, more twitching, veins popping, a brooding stare, poke, deep breathing, and then, slap. Naruto yelped as he was awoken by a stinging sensation on his cheek. He was having such a good dream too. Any dream about rivers of ramen was a good dream. Bleary-eyed, he jumped up and made out a hand coming his way, probably for another slap. Instinct kicked in as he grabbed the hand and twisted it so that it was easier for him to flip his assailant. He heard a thud as well as yelp of pain. Before he could properly react, he felt himself pushed aside by a much stronger force that caused him to stumble. Ma, I think that was quite a demonstration, Naruto." Blinking rapidly, Naruto's blurry vision finally cleared. Kakashi stood in front of him, an odd look on his face. Behind him, Sakura was on the ground, clutching her wrist with tears in his eyes. And a little to his left stood Sasuke. Naruto clenched his fists as he glanced at the Uchiha. Though he wanted to say something to the boy, he couldn't. It would do him no good to make a scene. Oh wait, he had already done that. Taking a deep breath, he looked up to the taller man, controlling his emotions very carefully. "Kakashi is alive now. Don't think about anything else." Kakashi looked exactly the same. Same gravity-defying hair, same headband, same face, same mask, same everything. The only thing that had changed was Naruto himself. "Naruto." Kakashi walked up to his amazingly silent student and tapped him on the shoulder. "Anyone there, sensei?" The blonde breathed. He would have said something else, but finally his gaze focused on Sakura, who still hadn't gotten up. Sakura, though in pain, didn't miss the fact that Naruto hadn't added his customary chan at the end, and neither did Kakashi, who raised an eyebrow. Sakura-chan, get up. Kakashi barked, more harshly than he had intended to. He sighed wearily. First Naruto maybe sensed him, and now he's flipping people out of pure instinct. Something had changed with the boy. For a split second, their eyes met and Kakashi blinked. Those eyes weren't the ones he had seen yesterday. No. Those eyes, those old eyes, reminded him of himself. Startled, the Pinkett rose to her feet shakily. Naruto had scared her out of her wits, and her sensei's tone was scaring her even more. Naruto, Kakashi began. I'm sorry Sakura-chan. I didn't mean to hurt you, it was an accident. Naruto apologized before Kakashi could finish what he was going to say. His sensei regarded him for a minute before nodding. Good, now Sakura, apologized to Naruto. The girl looked to her sensei with wide eyes. But you slapped him. Kakashi cut across her with a frigid tone. I saw that. If you had woken him up nicely, then he wouldn't have been startled and flipped you over like that. It hurt Naruto that Sakura couldn't bring herself to even look at him when she mumbled a quick, sorry. These people, they weren't the same people who he had left behind, they were younger and more immature. Throughout all of this, Naruto had been discreetly observing the stoic Uchiha, wondering what he was thinking. Naruto had seen a satisfied gleam in his eyes when Sakura was on the ground, though he could also detect a hint of anger as Sasuke's gaze turned on him. Anger for what though? Now then, Kakashi clapped his hands together. Since we're all awake and alert, let's go see what missions we might have. Very wisely, Naruto trailed behind his team as they made their way to Hokage Tower. Great, not one day back and I've already managed to screw up royally. He looked up to see Sakura not so discreetly trying to get Sasuke's attention, who was resolutely ignoring her. He also didn't miss the look that Kakashi sent his way, one that was halfway between concern and scrutiny. I wonder how Lee and Shikamaru are holding up. This is torture. Lee thought angrily as he dodged an angry punch from Neji. At first, seeing his team had been amazing, but now, with older eyes in his younger body, he was really getting pissed. And Lee didn't get angry easily. It all started when Guy had proposed a battle between the two taijutsu specialists. Lee had enthusiastically agreed, not remembering that in this time, he still regarded Neji as a rival as opposed to a comrade. In this way, he and Naruto were very much alike. The dead lasts of their classes challenging the rookies of the year. And both of them had eventually become more powerful than their rivals. Lee and Neji were generally well matched at this age, but Lee had the edge even though his control was abysmal. He was putting too much energy into certain attacks that knocked Neji flat as opposed to knocking him off his balance. He could sense that Guy was noticing something odd about him as well. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Yes, people would notice a change, but it was supposed to be subtle, not this overt. Damn, if he, the guy who didn't use chakra, at least not overtly, was having so much trouble, then he couldn't imagine what the others were going through. Neji's attacks were coming faster and much harder. Lee saw the expression of utter disdain on the boy's face. Disdain at himself or Lee though? Probably both. Lee could easily pinpoint the holes in Neji's offense and break through, but in this case, he had to lose so that it would look normal. At his opponent's next strike, Lee crossed his arms and took the blow head-on. Now this was supposed to cause Lee to fall back and Neji to win, but fate had other plans. The second Neji's gentle fist hit Lee, it was Neji who fell back due to the built-up chakra in Lee's arms. The Hyuga landed with a thud, spread eagle, flat on his back, a decidedly deadly expression on his face. In the future, Lee, through Tsunade's help, would that even though he couldn't mold chakra, that didn't mean that he couldn't use it as he had previously thought. Though it was obvious that he could indeed use chakra because of his taijutsu, the method as to how was still unclear. Until that is, Tsunade had sat him down and told him how. For him, everything was internal. He was able to build up energy in his body and release it, just like how the gates worked. Just for a moment, all was silent. Lee looked on in horror as Neji raised himself, a look of menace on his face. He brushed off his clothing in a regal manner and simply stood there, his eyes shooting daggers at Lee. The other boy knew that Neji had lost. Lee could see how fatigued he was. On the other hand, Lee felt great. The drain was nothing, and he didn't feel tired in the slightest. Winner. Lee. Guy proclaimed unnecessarily. Lee turned to his sensei who was standing with Tenten. Though Lee still won against Neji, their battles ended after a very long time, not the 5 minutes it had taken for Neji to lose. Hence the look of contemplation on Guy's face, and Tenten's shocked one. Neji-san. Making amends wouldn't work, but he had to give it a try. Nice match. It wouldn't be prudent to give the good guy pose right now, so Lee opted for a more appropriate handshake. Which Neji obviously refused. Lee knew Neji's status of a Hyuga had been hurt, and Lee knew that Neji would not forget this for a long time. But Lee also knew the man that Neji had become, and that was the image he focused on rather than the adolescent one. Lee. Guy began, his tone oddly quiet. What did you do? His pupil only shook his head and laughed in a very un-Lee-like manner. It was a rueful sound. I won, sensei. He looked back at Neji's sulking form. And by doing so, I took away the only thing he could hold on to. His pride. Shikamaru sighed for the 100th time that day. He was so happy to be a genin again. He was allowed to act lazy, allowed to just be a kid. And he was loving every second of it. They were taking a break now. Training had been fine. Well, for Ino and Choji it must have been rough, but for Shikamaru, who pretended to be exhausted, it was nothing. His stamina was too high for something like 10 minutes of intense, for a genin taijutsu to tire him out. All right team. Resting is over. Up. Hi sensei. The 3 genin chorused in unison and jumped to their feet. And that was when Shikamaru tensed. Asuma, Ino, and Choji were giving him incredulous looks. Oh, right. He was the lazy one, the one who prolonged getting up as much as possible. He did not get up when the others did. To save himself, he plopped down again, one arm covering his eyes. On the other hand, it's too troublesome. I'll just sleep for some more time. He heard Choji chuckle and Ino scoff and he sighed again, a sigh of relief. Even Asuma laughed slightly, but not before throwing the genin a look of contemplation. The glares were back. Naruto resisted putting out some of his killer intent towards the civilians, and he didn't glare back at them like he used to. This would get some getting used to. The glares had reduced significantly when he came back from his training trip with Jiraiya, probably because the village had seen what he had done against Neji, had heard about what he did against Gaara, and knew that he was the only reason Tsunade was back as Hokage. But right now, he was only a genin, one who had done nothing besides getting a bridge named after him. That was still a pretty major accomplishment in his book. The walk to Hokage Tower was filled with these glares, though they were muted by the fact that Kakashi had somehow traveled behind him, and unknowing to Naruto, the Jonin was giving out glares of his own at the offending civilians. One of the guards to the tower, Ayumi, if he wasn't mistaken, waved at Naruto and ruffled his hair gently when he was within hair-ruffling distance. Due to his constant presence with the Hokage, everyone in the tower knew him rather well, and only a select few protested his being there. Big mission today, Naruto-chan. The woman teased the teen. In return, she got a huge smile that showed all of his teeth and a thumbs up. Oh yeah, Hokage Gigi better give us an awesome mission. Naruto replied, letting his younger, more vibrant personality take over. After all his flops and one flip today, he would to dissipate the suspicion that he knew was clouding him, but knew that the Sandaime and Kakashi would not give up until they found what they were looking for. Therefore, he was very pleased to hear the amused chuckle of Kakashi from behind him and the typical, "Baka Naruto," from Sakura in front. Sasuke didn't say a word, just opting to remain as stoic as ever. Inwardly, Naruto braced himself for this visit. It had been 10 years for him since he had last seen the Sandaime alive, and he wasn't sure how he was going to react. While he truly loved the man as his grandfather, the Sandaime had also ordered the extermination of the Uchiha clan, which led to Sasuke's current personality, his future defection, and the death of possibly the bravest and most noble person after the Yondaime and Kushina, Uchiha Itachi. Itachi's sacrifice had been his home, his family, and ultimately his life. He hadn't forgotten the gift that Itachi had given him, and he wouldn't. It had amazed Naruto that even after his death, Itachi had not wanted the truth behind the massacre to come out. He did not want to tarnish the Uchiha name and be regarded as a hero. That man, along with Uchiha Shisui, they were the embodiment of an excellent shinobi. As they rounded the corner to the Hokage's office, Naruto steeled his darker emotions and put on the face of the happy-go-lucky idiot most thought him to be. The secretary led them into the missions area where the Sandaime was seated behind his desk, filling out some of the paperwork that he so abhorred. Naruto resisted in a deep breath at the sight of his Jiji. Idly, he wondered if the Sandaime would have to die in the Chunin exams. Was the third's fate set in stone, or could Naruto change it? And if he did change it, then that meant Tsunade would have to come to the village by different means. The blonde ninja shook ever so slightly at the sight of the Hokage's traditional hat. He hadn't been able to wear the thing. There was no time for showing your rank when it was wartime. Tsunade had made him Hokage in front of the forces just months before she had died. He had had the hat on his head for no more than 2 minutes before he took it off and gave what Gaara had called a speech for the books. Feeling 4 sets of eyes on him, the old man finally looked up to regard Team 7. He saw the Uchiha, as uncaring as ever, the girl Sakura, eagerly waiting to hear what he was going to say, Kakashi, behind them, his book snapped closed for once. And then there was him. The boy he had wanted to see. The Uzumaki Naruto, watching him silently, a 1,000-watt smile on his face, silent as a mouse. Jiji, Naruto said softly, taking in the familiar lines, the wrinkles, the crinkle of the man's eyes as he smiled, the customary pipe in his mouth. Kami, it had felt like just yesterday that he had been attending his funeral, and now he was alive. Hiruzen's smile faded when he saw the girl bop Naruto over the head for disrespecting him. The boy flinched and frowned at her before schooling his emotions and giving her his customary smile. Shikaku was right. Something truly was awry. Naruto had never hid his emotions this well before. The way Naruto had said that one word, Jiji, it had been filled with true emotion, happiness, relief, and just a tinge of grief. This wasn't like his usual exclamations. In all honesty, it was like Naruto was seeing him for the first time. Naruto. He smiled back at the boy, wondering what the kid was hiding behind the facade. Naruto had potential, limitless potential. With the Kyuubi, the longevity of the Uzumaki clan, and his mother and father's genes running through him, the boy was a powerhouse. After all, one does not just learn Kage Bunshin in an hour without tremendous patience and skill. Was it possible he was hiding even more along with his 2 friends? Are there any missions, Hokage-sama? Kakashi asked lazily. D rank, or C rank? Kakashi glanced at his team. After the display he had seen this morning, there was no way he believed their teamwork would hold on a C rank, so D rank it is then. he said out loud. There were no loud protests from Naruto, only a quiet pout along with a huff. Sarutobi just raised an eyebrow but said nothing and shuffled through the numerous mission requests. One specifically caught his eye. This would be interesting. Ah, here we go. How about 2? Kakashi nodded absently while Sasuke deflated at the prospect of doing more useless missions. Yakamura-san needs her garden weeded, and since it's nearly midday, I suggest you do that one first before the heat gets to all of you. Sarutobi paused and made sure Kakashi wasn't reading that perverted book that he himself had hidden in a drawer again. The second mission is a request by a clan. The Jonin looked up sharply. The Nara Ikizoku needed a team to tend to their deer. Now, normally Team 10 would do so as the young Nara is familiar with his own lands, but this is their day off. So, after you're done weeding, please proceed to their clan house. He's on to us, Naruto thought with resignation, knowing this would happen eventually. It was too soon though, for the leader of the village to be suspicious. But he's cautious, and doesn't know how to proceed. I should have guessed Shikaku-san would have told the Hokage about us 3. If this were any other mission, and Naruto had not just spent the previous evening at Shika's house, then he wouldn't have given it a second thought. But the timing of this mission was a little too calculated. Nara. Sakura tapped her chin thoughtfully, trying to place the familiar name. Oh, Shikamaru's house. That's the one, Sarutobi said cheerfully, a bit disappointed that Naruto hadn't shown the slightest bit of a reaction to the name. While he didn't want the child to know that he wanted to know what those 3 were up to, he wanted to see what Naruto was capable of. Shikaku had said that the boy had shown signs of being a censor. Hiruzen wanted to put that to the test. His hands folded over the table, he tapped his desk 3 times, knowing that Tori, who was hidden in the corner, would make his presence known just slightly. The Anbu in question peered at his leader quizzically through his mask, wondering why he was being beckoned. But then the old man shook his head nearly imperceptibly, causing Tori to stop in his tracks. His eyes narrowed. What was the old man trying to do? Naruto was rocking back and forth on his heels, waiting for Kakashi and the old man to be done exchanging details. He didn't dare try and enhance his hearing with chakra. He could go deaf after all. All of a sudden, he stopped. He could feel something in the corner of the room, and it felt familiar, just like how Kakashi's chakra had felt. He knew this presence, knew it quite well. It had to be an Anbu, only their presence would be in the Hokage's office when he was supposedly alone. Yamato Taicho. That's who it was. Why was he in the Hokage's office as a guard? Wasn't he involved with Root at this time? Involuntarily, his eyes flickered to the place where the chakra was coming from, trying to get a glimpse of the man who had helped him in so many ways. Something wrong, Naruto. The old man's voice caused him to look back to the Hokage instead of the corner. No, nothing's wrong, Gigi. Everything's great, he chirped brightly, taking one last long look at the ANBU's hiding place before going to the back of the room with the rest of his team who were mercifully ignoring him. Not once did he notice the glances that Kakashi and Sarutobi exchanged. Or so they thought. Did you see that? The aged man asked Kakashi in a murmur. The Cyclops nodded, discreetly waving to Tenzo. Good guy, but too rigid. Naruto was trying to get a good look at him. He sensed him. For a moment, the elder Sarutobi looked pensive. I want you to try and look underneath and tell me if you can feel something different about him. I do, and he's only been here for 5 minutes. Develop this skill of his, and see what else he's not telling us. Hokage-sama. Kakashi ran a hand through his hair wearily, not wanting to voice this particular thought. This doesn't have anything to do with. No, Sarutobi interrupted him firmly yet softly. Absolutely not. During your wave mission, the seal was not weakened as much as we thought. I corresponded with Jiraiya, and he should be here soon just to make sure. But Naruto is not being influenced by the fox at all. Kakashi nodded and glanced at his team who were waiting for him patiently, well judging by Sakura's annoyed expression, and Sasuke's squinty eyes, not so patiently. Surprisingly, it was Naruto who was the most patient, partially because his eyes were glued to where Tori still stood. And one more thing, Kakashi-kun. Sarutobi stared into the Jonin's visible eye. Pay close attention to how he interacts with the rest of the Naras, as well as your team. Kakashi was puzzled, but complied nonetheless. Hi, Hokage-sama, can we go now? Sakura asked impatiently, her foot tapping on the ground in a very annoying way. Kakashi just sighed and gestured for his team to leave, but not before he saw Naruto very deliberately wink at the Sandaime and throw a wave at the hidden man in the corner. He sighed again. His sensei's son truly was the most unpredictable ninja of all times. The first mission passed without a hitch. The three worked silently, yet diligently, with Naruto's shadow clones helping out quite a bit. Though it was a boring mission, it was still a mission. The woman, who surprisingly didn't shoot Naruto a nasty look, was an elderly and kind-looking woman who even offered the three children after their work. It was the second mission that he was dreading. Not that he didn't like deer, he really did. And he knew the grounds pretty well too. After Jiraiya's death, he and Shikamaru had gotten pretty close as they both knew what it was like to lose a mentor. Shikamaru had shown him where they led the deer out to frolic. The animal had a calming and innocent influence on you, so different from war. No matter how much he had tried today, he just couldn't bring himself to act completely how he did when he was 12. The experiences from war had changed him. And they had changed Shikamaru and Lee as well. Lee would probably have the same problems that he did, while Shikamaru wouldn't slip up as much. Before he knew it, they were in front of the Nara clan house, giving Naruto a sense of déjà vu. Then again, this life, this timeline, was nothing if not déjà vu. The door war opened by a small girl, probably 5 or 6 years old, who looked like a second cousin of Shikamaru's or something. Sakura couldn't help but coo over the child, who gave the older girl a disdainful look, much to Naruto's well-hid amusement. Ka-chan, she called. She no buyer here. Her eyes widened when she saw Naruto, and he was rather bemused when she threw him a wave and scurried out into the house. Another Nara, one who had the typical straight black hair that was tied in a high ponytail, greeted them with a warm smile. Thanks for coming. I'll lead you to where the deer are. So far so good, Naruto thought as they walked onto the grassy space. He didn't realize that they were on a slope, and his footing slipped slightly before an arm caught him from falling completely. The Nara woman was holding him upright, her lips curved upward. Arigato. He righted himself, gently detaching himself from her grip. Naruto-san, watch out, kiddo. Naruto stared at her blankly, not quite sure if he knew her, or she knew him just because he was, well, him. I'll keep that in mind, Nara-san. The sarcasm in his voice was barely perceptible, but he was positive that she caught it, judging by the snort she gave. From behind, Kakashi watched the little interaction with more than a little curiosity. Was this why the Sandaime had asked him to watch Naruto and the Naras closely? It was clear that the boy felt uncomfortable with the attention, and the woman seemed like she was chiding him almost. There was almost a familiar feeling present here. Nice picture, by the way. The woman murmured low enough for only Naruto to hear. His eyes narrowed, but his footsteps were even, showing no signs of slowing down. Picture. The one that's on the fridge, of course. Yoshino-sama took a wonderful picture last night that she labeled Sleeping Beauties. You boys looked so angelic whilst sleeping. You're welcome to take a look afterwards. The horrified look on the kid's face was priceless. Oh crap. The boy stuck his hands in his pockets and scowled. I'm guessing most people have seen it. She only smiled wider. Of course. Poor Shikamaru. You have no idea. They came upon the vast land of the Nara estate. It was acres and acres of grassland and the woods beyond it. Naruto marveled in its beauty. The open feeling, the green grass, the peaceful atmosphere, everything had been destroyed during the war. By his side, he heard the intake of breath from Sakura as a resounding HN from Sasuke. Looks like he wasn't the only one who was impressed. Sate, your jobs are to bring the deer back to this land. At the current moment, they are in the woods, grazing. We need them here in about 2 hours. The woman winked at Naruto. Good luck. 2 hours. Sakura groaned. I've read about the Nara deer. They're as lazy as the Nara clan itself. They won't come in our time slot. Ma. Sakura-chan. Have patience. Nay, just work together all right. And remember, no jutsus that will destroy the woods are permitted. Kakashi threw a pointed glance at Sasuke, who huffed. The Jonin just smiled with his eyes and made himself comfortable on the soft grass, his book in hand already. This would be incredibly relaxing. Naruto surveyed the territory. It was quite a lot, but he had his kage bunshin, so it wouldn't be too bad to locate the deer. Shikamaru had once told him that if a non-Nara were to try and get the deer back, they usually used music or something soothing that would lure the deer towards the sound. Naruto had used the flute, and immediately, a family of deer had surrounded him. Nay, Sakura-chan, Sasuke, I think we should. Naruto was cut off by Sasuke. Shut up, Dobi. No one cares what you think right now. Let's just go into the woods and do this stupid mission. With that, the Uchiha slumped away with Sakura in tow. A sudden surge of anger was tamped down by the more rational side of Naruto's brain. He wouldn't make a scene right now. If Sasuke didn't want to work with him, then fine. Kakashi had told them to work together, right? Well then, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Immediately, 10 clones popped into existence, saluting the boss at the same time. He could work together with copies of himself as well. Find the deer, and once you've done that, alert me immediately. Naruto, knowing full well that Kakashi was listening to everything he had said and done. Maybe now would be a good time just to have a chat with his sensei without the presence of the others. Just for old, new times sake. Kakashi had watched as the other two genins had dismissed Naruto before he even had a chance to speak, and instead of retaliating, Naruto had controlled his anger and let them go without screaming profanities. It seemed as though the boy had an actual plan as well. And that tone he had used with his clones, it was one that he himself had used with his Anbu quite often. It was the tone of a leader. He frowned. Hadn't he told them to work together? What were the other two thinking? Naruto turned around and walked towards his sensei, shaking his head at the sight of the omnipresent Ika tactics in Kakashi's hand. He too sat on the grass and breathed out deeply. It was nice to just relax in this air. Now he knew why Shikamaru was so lazy. One could spend hours and hours here and not want to leave. Aren't you supposed to be doing the mission? Kakashi drawled, giggling at a particular part on the page, not once looking up from his book. I am. Naruto replied softly, in a decidedly un-Naruto-like tone. Now that caused the older man to throw a sideways glance at his student, or rather, Tenmis are doing the job. Why aren't you helping your teammates? Though he knew the answer, Kakashi would ask the kid himself. A brief frown was on Naruto's face before he turned to face Kakashi completely. The boy seemed to be thinking about what to say before actually saying it. Am I that bad to work with? The boy's tone was completely serious. Kakashi scratched his chin as if he was thinking about what Naruto had said, but in actuality, he believed that it was the other way around. You're a bit loud and annoying at times, but you're a hard worker who gets the job done. Naruto smiled, and Kakashi had to blink a couple times. This wasn't the typical Naruto smile. This was a soft smile that reminded him exactly of his sensei. The kid just had to grow a foot and have a deeper voice and voila, the Yondaime would return. If that's true, then why can't they, he gestured to the woods, ever listen to what I say? His blue eyes bore into Kakashi's lone gray one. Sensei, I know that you think that teamwork is important, but the only time we've worked together is during the wave mission, and that's because we thought you were going to die, and so we had to work together. But in missions like these, we do our own separate work. Sakura-chan tries to copy Sasuke, and I'm left on my own. Naruto ran his fingers through the grass, exhaling softly, glad that he could rant a bit. You said that we had to look underneath the underneath, right? So then why can't they do that? Why can't my own teammates get to know me? All the time that he spoke for, Naruto's eyes never left Kakashi's. The older man was quite simply stunned by what his student had just said. Yes, he had noticed the tension and the dynamics, but he hadn't really tried to change it. He didn't realize that Naruto felt this way, although he knew that he was left out. The boy's tone was so brutally raw that it hurt. The kid and he were more alike than he originally thought. At first, Kakashi had viewed Naruto as Obito the loud, brash, but determined Baka. Sasuke was him lone and brooding, and Sakura was Rin the one who belittled Obito and idolized Kakashi. Now though, he could tell that Naruto wore a mask just like he did. He hid everything under that cheery facade. Who knew how much pain was just under the layers? Before Kakashi could answer, Naruto stood and dusted those horrid orange pants off. He would make it a point to buy his kid new clothes sometime soon. My clones have found them. I'll go finish the mission now. With a sad smile, the genin moved a couple yards away and sat down once more. Curious as to what he was doing, Kakashi moved with him, watching as Naruto pulled out a small flute from his pouch, wondering why he had one in the first place. He didn't realize that the flute was just a hanged kunai. And then the kid started playing the little thing, fingers dancing over the holes, playing a soft melody that no doubt the deer would be able to pick up. Kakashi had no idea that Naruto could play, and frankly, up until now, he didn't actually think Naruto had a viable plan. However, the deer came out, flocking towards the genin. At first, a couple fawns appeared, followed by 5 bucks. Then, the longer Naruto played, the more deer arrived. Kakashi could only watch as within minutes, the once open meadow was filled with at least 100 deer. Beautiful, isn't it? A voice next to him said. Looking up, Kakashi saw the head of the Nara clan as well as the commander of the Jonin standing by him. Within seconds, the book was gone, and Kakashi gave Shikaku a salute. Sir. The older man just snorted and watched as a disgruntled Sakura and Sasuke stomped out of the forest, only to stop at the sight of Naruto surrounded by all the deer that they had been sent to find. The kid's something else. He shook his head. That Gaki reminds you of Minato, doesn't he? Shikaku glanced over to his stoic companion who seemed to have a tough time responding. Is that why you wouldn't take him? You know, after. He was just too much like him. Kakashi bristled slightly, not liking the insinuation that his commander was making. After the attack, I couldn't think straight. When the village was being rebuilt, I threw myself into Anbu, wishing that I would forget everything. I couldn't take him. I was only 15, and didn't have the mindset to raise a child. Naruto wouldn't have gotten a parent in me, or even an older brother. I would have been a kid raising a kid. But I looked after him when I could, I protected him, and now I'm his sensei. I'm going to make it up to him, he stated firmly. Shikaku nodded, chuckling when Naruto was knocked over by a buck who had nuzzled him forcefully. Yoshino said that he's more like Kushina. He sighed deeply. Konoha has failed him in every way, you know. He's a hero, and look how he's treated by the civilians. Kakashi could say nothing, so he kept his mouth shut. It wasn't surprising that the Naras had figured out Naruto's true parenthood. No one save those closest to Minato and the elders knew who Naruto's parents were. But one day, that kid will be great, Shikaku said with a smirk. Who knows, he might even be Hokage. Kakashi's eyes traveled from Naruto, who had a silly grin on his face while stroking a young fawn, to Sakura and Sasuke, who were watching the boy with jealous eyes. I believe that, but right now, the future Hokage's sensei needs to go report a successful mission. It was nice talking to you, Commander. Shikaku watched as Kakashi gently ruffled Naruto's hair and beckoned for the other two to catch up to them as well. He noticed how Kakashi kept himself as the barrier between Naruto and the rest of his team. A frown marred his face. These team dynamics were skewed. It didn't look like a true unit. As they came closer, Naruto's eyes widened at the sight of the head Nara, much to said man's amusement. Mina, this is Nara Shikaku, commander of the Jonin, as well as the head of the Nara Ikizoku. Kakashi introduced him in a bored tone. Konnichiwa, Nara-sama, Sakura said shyly. All she got in return was a nod of the man's head. Sasuke appraised the man, and couldn't believe that someone who seemed as lazy as Shikamaru was one of the most powerful men in the village. Konnichiwa, Naruto-kun, Shikaku addressed the kid, who looked up sharply. I'm impressed by the way you brought our deer in. Arigato, Shikaku-san. Naruto held the man's onyx gaze, noticing the change from last night's san to today's kun. It was actually really relaxing. Sakura looked appalled at the way her teammate had just addressed such an important man so casually, but refrained from saying anything due to the look Kakashi shot her. The Nara raised an eyebrow. That was new, really, so you wouldn't mind coming over a couple times a week and helping Shikamaru? He kept a passive face at the sudden scrutiny that the blonde was putting him through. But the small nod that the boy gave him made him smile ever so slightly. It would be my pleasure. Kakashi observed the dialogue between the two, slightly puzzled by the same air of familiarity that he had felt when Naruto was with the other Nara woman. It was just something else to report to the Sandaime. Overall, what he had found was not pleasant. His team was more disjointed than he had originally, though. Sasuke was even more distant with them than he had been in the beginning. Sakura seemed torn, and Naruto was much more than he seemed. Come on, my kawaii genin, we must report back to the Sandaime. Kakashi's visible eye turned into an upside-down U, symbolizing a smile. His genin just grumbled and started to walk to the front of the complex. Kakashi. The Jonin commander had his arms folded across his chest, the frown on his face deepening his scar. Hi, keep an eye out on him, okay. The Cyclops just nodded and followed the trio, wondering why everyone were taking such a particular interest in Naruto all of a sudden. Lee sat on the ground of the training field long after his team was gone. A lot of things had gone wrong, and a lot had gone right. After his fight with Neji, Guy had gone to talk to him, leaving just him and Tenten. He enjoyed the girl's presence. She wasn't like any of the other kunoichi of her day, and had taken her training very seriously. Talking to Tenten was a welcome change from fighting with Neji. They had talked about many different things, from Tenten's weapons, to Lee's victory, to their dinner plans, and so on. Afterwards, Guy had made them do some laps and basic stretches coupled with a bit of taijutsu. He had sorely missed being part of this team, and even though Neji was intentionally cold to him, he kept on a cheery face. But now, that face was gone, and was replaced by one of determination. Can I join you? Shikamaru's voice drifted from his left. Lee glanced at one of his best friends and motioned for the man-turned boy to sit. Today, Shikamaru-kun, was it all right for you? The younger boy nodded and stared at the sky as it prepared for sunset. Seeing them all here, alive again, it feels like a dream. I agree. But the expression on Lee's face didn't match his tone. I'm afraid that I might have slipped up today. Shikamaru raised a brow. How? Lee let out a mirthless laugh. I beat Neji. Ah. Comprehension dawned on the Nara. Neji's pride must have been damaged severely. He needed to be brought down a few notches though. Before his fight with Naruto, the boy had a stick up his. But that stick wasn't as big as the one that Sasuke had. Speaking of the Uchiha, how do you think Naruto's doing? Lee jumped up, taking Shikamaru with him. Come, let us go to Ichiraku Ramen. I have no doubt that Naruto-kun will meet us there, and we shall satisfy our stomachs as well. He sprinted away, not giving Shikamaru a chance to say no. Shaking his head, the Nara just grinned fondly. Lee, you sly dog. You just want to see Ayame-chan again. The missions were successful, I take it. Sarutobi asked when Team 7 returned to be paid. Kakashi nodded slowly, but let his eyes travel to Naruto. The Sandame must have understood, because he paused for a moment before shaking his head. Sandame-sama, I have a request though. The genin looked at their sensei quizzically. On the last mission to the Nara house, Sakura and Sasuke did virtually none of the work. I was watching them carefully. It was Naruto who did most of the work, therefore please let 90% of the pay go to Naruto. His statement was met by indignant sputtering by Sakura, a very dark scowl by Sasuke, and a genuinely confused look by Naruto. But sensei, Sakura made to protest, but she was cut off by Kakashi's stare. I heard everything, Sakura. I heard how Sasuke cut off Naruto's suggestion, one that worked by the way, and how you followed him. Tell me, why didn't you give Naruto a chance to finish his sentence? The girl's mouth moved up and down, her eyes darting back from her crush to Naruto. In truth, she wanted to turn around the second her and Sasuke had entered the forest, because Sasuke went down his own path, and Sakura was utterly lost. Neither of them had found any deer until all of a sudden, at least a dozen of them were walking right towards her. When she had walked out, she was going to exclaim that she had done it, but then Sasuke had been by her side, a disgruntled expression on his face. And that expression had turned downright frightening when they had learned that out of all the people in the world, it was Baka Naruto who had lured the deer back and completed the mission single-handedly. You're right, sensei, Sakura murmured softly, her face overheating with embarrassment. I don't deserve the money. She didn't meet Naruto or Kakashi's eyes, because simply speaking, she couldn't. Whatever, Sasuke muttered darkly, knowing full well that he hadn't been able to do anything on this stupid mission, and that the Dobi had done all the work. Good, Kakashi smirked. Well, Naruto, I guess we can count this as a solo D-rank mission, seeing as your teammates clearly did absolutely nothing. Naruto wondered if Kakashi was purposely trying to make the vein in Sasuke's forehead larger by pointing this fact out. Although he didn't want the money, it did feel good to have someone defend him once in a while. Anyo, Kakashi-sensei, it's okay, you don't. Naruto, just shut up and accept it, okay. Kakashi was still smiling, but there was just a hint of malice underneath it that had Naruto sighing in a resigned manner. Hi, I understand. Naruto turned to Sakura and Sasuke. The boy was ignoring him, but Sakura gave him an apologetic look that made him smile. Sasuke left the room, his scowl widening with each step. Sakura faltered when she saw him leave, and waited a good 2 minutes until the boy was gone until following. That left Naruto, Kakashi, the Hokage, and his omnipresent Anbu in the room. Naruto was feeling a bit uncomfortable in the presence of the two, who were currently looking at him intently. You did good today, Naruto. Kakashi remarked softly. Nara-sama seemed impressed with your work. Naruto, though, didn't look too proud of himself. If anything, there was a bitter smile on his face. Well, It was nothing really. Just Uzumaki Naruto, born animal tamer. Ignoring the sharp looks thrown his way, the boy waved at the older men and pocketed his money. He walked out of the room with a smile. Finally, it was time to eat ramen. And now he had more than enough to treat his friends and eat as much as he wanted. So, Hiruzen half asked, half demanded as he gestured for Kakashi to take a seat. Kakashi shook his head. I don't know how I missed this. He's changed, a lot. I heard him say Dadbeo all of one time today, and he seemed more polite. This entire day had been odd, Hokage-sama. How so? The old man rested his chin on his entwined hands, eager to hear more about his favorite genin. This morning, I swear that Naruto sensed me, just like he did with Tenzo. And then, Sakura was kind enough to wake the kid up with a nice slap to the face. I watched as he grabbed her wrist and flipped her with practiced ease. He was still half asleep at this point, I suppose, because once his eyes refocused, he immediately apologized. Kakashi took a deep breath, letting the Hokage digest what he had said. Go on. At first, I was surprised why you asked me to watch how he and the Nara clan got along. Then, when the woman who led us down to the meadow walked alongside Naruto, I got the impression that she knew him, but it didn't seem like he knew her at all. Sarutobi was surprised when Kakashi made a frustrated noise in the back of his throat. When they began, Sasuke and Sakura completely disregarded what Naruto was going to say. I really thought that he would do something to make them listen, but he just shook his head and summoned a dozen or so clones and told them to go look for the deer. I'm assuming there's more to this story than just you recounting a rather boring mission. Kakashi watched the ringlets of smoke drift up. Asuma and the Hokage had the same bad habit. Of course, he and I chatted. Naruto asked me why no one bothers to see, underneath, when it comes to him. I didn't have an answer to that. Kakashi's visible eye drooped slightly. As much as I know you don't want to hear this, I truly believe that he's like me, Hokage-sama. Sarutobi leaned forward, interested and greatly saddened by Kakashi's analysis. Konoha had really done badly when it came to the fourth's wishes. Explain. He's hiding himself. From what I've seen today, it honestly doesn't seem that Naruto should have been the dead last. True, he is a bit slow, but he knows how to improvise on the fly. I expected him to use brute strength to capture and subdue the deer. Instead, the kid pulls out a flute and starts playing it. The deer just surrounded him. That's why I asked for Naruto to receive most of the money. The other two didn't help much at all. Hiruzen swallowed the lump in his throat. When Tori and Saru had returned with the Naruto's progress reports, he had carefully combed through them, looking for hints as to Naruto's other skills. But what he found disturbed him. It seems as though Naruto was repeatedly forced out of classes nearly every day before Iruka took over due to some complaint or another. The lectures that Naruto had missed were those of basic taijutsu training, survival skills, shinobi dress codes, all the major laws, and so on. It was like the teachers were setting him up for failure. And yet, Naruto had passed, albeit in an unorthodox manner. He even had a bridge named after him. Shikaku-sama himself came to see how the team was doing, and seemed intrigued by Naruto. Kakashi continued, breaking Sarutobi out his thoughts. The Nara clan has taken an acute liking to the kid. I don't know why, or what he did to invite their presence in his life, but I don't think that the Naras are going to let Naruto go. Interesting. The Sandaime muttered. Of course they did. Naruto was a mystery, and it was the Nara clan's job to deduce them. Their own son was one as well. Just take care of him, Kakashi. We've failed him and his parents in many ways. I want him to surpass them, and us. He will. Hokage-sama, I know he will. Kakashi believed what he had said. His sensei had placed his trust in Naruto, and he would as well. You took your time, Shikamaru commented when his friend plunked down in the seat next to him. Naruto looked worn out and more than ready for a meal. To his other side, Lee was paying more attention to Ayame than the conversation. Not that anyone could blame him. After all, it had been 4 years since the spandex-clad man, teen had seen his lover who was still just slightly older than they were and not Lee's lover, yet. I screwed up, big time. Naruto moaned dramatically, placing his head in his palms. The Hokage is definitely suspecting that something's a bit off with me, and I accidentally flipped Sakura-chan over, and I went to your house, got all your gear, talked to your dad again, and... Shikamaru clamped his hand over the blonde's mouth lest he give him a headache. Okay, just stop. Naruto, you said yourself that people around us will perceive a change. He lowered his voice so only Lee and Naruto would hear. So just deal with it. We know that you can't act the way you did as a kid, and we understand that people will be suspicious. So just relax. He removed his hand. Okay. Naruto nodded, looking more innocent than he should have. Wait, you went to my house. Naruto answered in the affirmative, bouncing up and down, waiting until he could order the food of the gods. I led the deer back to the meadows. With the flute, Shikamaru questioned. Yep, speaking of which, Shikaku-san asked me to help you out with that once in a while. TCH, he probably wants to know more about our friendship. Without a doubt, he'll rope Lee into it too. Nosy old man, Shikamaru grumbled, but there was an air of affection towards his father in his voice that Lee and Naruto picked up on. I should warn you, Shikamaru, Naruto said seriously, your mom took a picture of the three of us sleeping. Most of your clan's already seen it, though I haven't. A troublesome came out of Shikamaru's mouth while Lee was trying to contain giggles. Naruto-kun. Ayame's voice drifted towards them, causing Lee to perk up immediately. Ayame-ne-chan. Naruto squealed with genuine affection. You three boys ready to order? She asked, tucking a lock of hair behind her ear. They nodded in unison, and rattled off what they wanted. Shikamaru and Lee resolutely ignored the number of bowls that Naruto ordered. It had been half a decade since he had eaten it. They would cut him some slack, just for today. As each of them prattled on about how their day had went, the sun lazily descended behind the horizon, bidding adieu and letting the moon do her job. From high above, stars twinkled merrily, winking at each other as they kept vigil over Konoha. It had been a long day, and the warriors needed to rest. Naruto looked up to see 2 stars that gleamed the brightest of them all. His lips turned up in the smallest of smiles, a warm feeling filling him. He hadn't felt this way in a long time. He was back where he belonged. He and his brethren would change the fate of Konoha. War was imminent, but this time, they would win. Believe it, ttey bayo.